Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to another 320 Sim Pilot live stream. And today we're going to take our glorious A321 from Iceland, Keflavik, where we left it on our last flight, and we're going to fly it back over to Scotland, and this time we're going to head into Edinburgh. I don't think we've done a flight to Edinburgh so far, so I thought it would be fun to go and see it. And we'll maybe get a nice view of the scenery. We have the Orbex scenery for Scotland, so we should be able to get a nice view of the town, maybe do a visual approach into Edinburgh, which I think should be a bit of fun. Now, as always, please do keep the feedback coming, especially on the audio. Just let me know whether it's working for you guys or not, because it's quite hard for me to tell when I'm streaming these things. But as always, I will say this is not for any real-world use, of course, just for our use in Flight Simulator. We are here on the gate, and I believe this is the gate we left ourselves on last time in Iceland. Gate 14, got all the trucks and everything pretty much loaded up and ready to go, and the plane is almost ready. It's about a 1 hour, and I think it's a fairly long flight today, actually, maybe 1 hour 55 minutes. So I don't want to spend too long on the ground. We'll get ourselves taxiing out and departing, probably from the northerly runway today. We won't be on VATSIM today. That'll give us a bit of room to do some flying around once we get to Scotland. I'll just jump into the chat now and say hello to some people. There's lots of you joining us, so thank you very much for coming along. Good to see you again. Dougal and Liz, thanks for coming along and moderating today. We've got Yes Papa from Discord, a long-time viewer as well. A few questions saying, will I be doing any live streams in Microsoft Flight Simulator? Yes, I will. They will happen, and it's becoming clear that you guys would like to see that, so I'll just start working on what sort of thing we might like to see. And as always, in our Discord, you can post any suggestions of what you'd like to see. I know there's a lot of requests for 320 flights in that. I'm just waiting for the updates to the mod to get it slightly more stable so it's more reliable, and then we might be able to get a good stream out of it. Hello, General Error, Pavel, thanks for coming along. Miko, Andy H1302, who's another Discord user. The Discord invite should be in the description for today's video. And Andy's in the Isle of Wight, so I hope you're enjoying that. I think Andy's a truck driver, so or a coach driver, I should say. Finn, good. Thank you for joining us live today. I hope you enjoy it. Donald, no, we're going to stay off VATSIM for today's flight, if you're referring to last time. Mr. Espresso, thanks for coming along. Turtle Kayak, I'm recognising a lot of these names. Thank you guys for coming. Mateo's managed to join in. Good to see you, Mateo. Thanks for coming along. Gary, I mean, there's loads of you, so if I miss anyone's name out, I do apologise. But Corey, thanks for coming along. I'm glad Microsoft Flight Simulator's sent you here. Fly24, thanks for joining us. And Scott Keeley, watching the last few of the videos on YouTube. That's great. I'm glad you've enjoyed them, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy the stream as well. Right, let's get ourselves underway. So, as I said, here we are on stand 14, and it's time to jump into the flight deck. Please do excuse me if I make a mess of all my controls as we go along today. I've been struggling to swap my controls between the two simulators. But here we are in a pretty much ready to go aircraft, just on the ground power at the moment. Passengers still boarding, I suppose. Seatbelt signs off. Fueling's just about finished. We've ended up with 11 tons. I'll just take you through the route in the MCDU first. So obviously I think this is the latest update from Navigraph 2010. It didn't give me a warning, so I think that's right. And we're going to be the Manta 231. But as I said, not on ATC today. We're going to cruise at flight level 350, cost index 34, so quite a high cost index really. Which would probably result in quite a speedy climb and ridiculous speed descent in the ToLiss, it always seems to, so I might adjust that with an alternate of Manchester Echo Golf Charlie Charlie, which all seems pretty reasonable. Have loaded in the winds for this sort of flight, which would be useful on a long sector oceanic sort of flight like this. Flight plan wise, let's bring up our navigation display, and what we can see is we are going to be taking off to the north, making a right turn using an RNAV SID, which gives us these waypoints that are just completely, I would say soulless, but they just don't have any names. Like you get like Clyde and Tartan when we get over to Edinburgh, but when you're doing an RNAV, it's just these waypoints. So KF, presumably Keflavik, 218, 211, speed limits of 210, and then not actually, there's no speed limit there for us because we're going to just make a gentle turn to the southeast on the Oscom. Eventually, if I scroll through, that brings us to Oscom. And then we'll go from there with a direct to, I think it's pronounced Ginga, I'm not sure, but there we go. As you can see, the quite high terrain requirements on this departure, probably because of the fact you're going to turn back round and fly over Iceland. And you can see the climb gradients required are quite steep. 8% for the Oscom 3 Alpha up to flight level 130, which is quite high. It means that if we're flying along at maybe 200 to 250 knots, we're going to need to maintain about 2,000 feet per minute to make that gradient. Initial climb clearance from ATC, but I've gone with something I think might be reasonable, flight level 130 for now. So that's the start of the route. It then carries on pretty straightforward really, direct to Bruce and then Lima 602 to Clyde, which drops us off just to the east of Edinburgh. Secondary, well, there's not going to be much of an emergency turn, but what I will do is, I think if we have an engine failure on takeoff for any reason, we might consider not turning right, or maybe if we do turn right, maybe bringing ourselves back around to the south as opposed to heading over towards the high grounds, because we won't make these restrictions, we won't make 8% climb gradient, that's for sure. Tom Harvey says, is the ToLiss better than the flight factor these days? Well, it's I don't know, to be honest. I don't have the flight factor A320. I think they're both sort of sitting in their own high level, so I think they're both very good. It's probably the answer. Most people seem to enjoy both of them as opposed to one or the other at the moment. Right, so that is most of the flight plan. We'll just load in the performance. Quite a busy flight today we've gone for. I'll bring up the ICS. Loading. 170 passengers. They didn't want to take many bags with them, luckily. Gives us zero fuel weight 66.7. So let's get that in. 66.7 with a CG of quite forward 19.3. 321s often have a forward CG. It's quite normal actually. I suppose just the way they are with their long fuselage. We've got 11 tons of fuel, which I'll put in 11. Take weight 77.5. Which is absolutely fine. Let's go to our performance page. We're doing a flap 1 takeoff from the northerly runway. The wind is ever so slightly favouring the north, and I thought that'd be nice for our departure. So here we go, some nice high speeds. This will be quite fun. So runway 01 with no shift, we'll go for a full length takeoff. Flaps can be at 1, flexing to temperature of 37. So high thrust, long runway. Yeah, this should be good fun. Speed 162. And you do get speeds this high in the 321. It's definitely possible. I still think these ToLiss speeds are slightly higher than I expect, but we'll take it. 165, clean is 228. Now that is important today because as we saw earlier, we actually have a 210 restriction there. So we'll need to keep flap 1 out until we're round that turn, and then we can accelerate, lower the nose and clean up. Something that might interest you is that if you have a speed of 210, some of you will know that as we accelerate, the aircraft will actually take off in config 1 plus F. It will give us a little bit of flap for the takeoff. At 210 knots, it will retract just the flaps and leave the slats out, which is fine. But what can happen is that can make it feel a little bit uncomfortable. The nose might go even higher. Now, it's totally safe, but some people will pre-select a lower speed for the initial part. For example, I could pre-select 200 knots. And that way, we'll keep the flap out as well, which some people might find more comfortable. It's not required, but if I put 200 in the climb phase, so I press performance next phase, 200 into pre-sell, it should automatically go to 200 knots. The other advantage of that is now it will stay at 200 knots all the way along until I manage the speed, until I tell the aircraft to take back control of the speed. Which means that if we're distracted, which we shouldn't be, but if we end up having to deal with something else as we go round this waypoint, the airplane won't start accelerating without us. We'll have to tell it. So it might help you save embarrassment with a flat bust. Just a way to sort of slow things down. So there we go. Right, let's get some of the doors closed up. So, ground services, let's get all these things ready, close. I had them all open today, thought it'd be fun, although probably quite a cold aeroplane if you had all those doors open and it's 6 degrees outside. I wonder if it represents that. No, still reckon it's 33. It definitely wouldn't be that warm. Let's get that APU up and running, master switch on. Now, this is one of the few things where the Microsoft Airbus is slightly more accurate because you only have to wait 3 seconds, but the ToLiss still wants 5. And there we go, that's starting up. Seatbelt signs can go on, the fuel is on board, and we'll let that get warmed up. It's quite a low QNH day, typical, I suppose, of Iceland, really. QNH 1002, 6 degrees, yeah, pretty wintry autumn, I suppose, weather. The plan is to taxi out, probably along this N4, south on Echo, all the way for a full-length takeoff from runway 01. Right, let's get rid of that. Let the APU spool up. I'll just jump into the chat. Good evening, Pilot Peely. Thanks for joining us. Well, those joining in, smooth flying as well. Is there a difference between the ToLiss A321 and A319? I don't have the A319, so do please, hopefully if anyone else knows they can answer. I think they're very similar, and even if there's a slight difference, they tend to update one to match the other. I've noticed that quite a lot. 137 watching are there apparently. Yeah, my viewer count isn't working, so I can't see some of the numbers. So yeah, well, very good. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Right, so there we go. The slides have armed automatically. I mean, that wouldn't happen in real life until they were told to. Primarily because if we go outside, what we can see. Thanks for subscribing to, I think that's Ghost Rider 1712, so a very accurate name for a flight channel. Excellent. Yeah, as you can see, you wouldn't actually arm these slides because now if they open with the ground equipment out there, then they'll get obstructed, especially things like this rear door. But there you go. Small details, I suppose. Right, let's get all the vehicles driving away. Fueling's on. Again, I always say it, I do love this ground handling add-on. And we do have better pushback today, so I will be actually managing hopefully a normal pushback. I finally remembered to get that installed on the newer computer. Right, let me just check. If I do miss anything, I apologise. Again, I'm having slight difficulty to live chat with my chat running live. Richard Leonard, thanks for subscribing as well. Right, there we go. They're all moving away. That APU is spooling up. I love the exhaust effect out the back. Get ourselves back in the flight deck. Okay, so we've got our 11 tons. I'll just check it's in the right place. Nicely balanced. Yeah, 5.5 tons, which is great. Still missing the fuel temperature. I believe there is a ToLiss update coming soon, though. I've heard it mentioned on the Discord, so that could be a nice feature. I'm going to get rid of that. I just have one needle. You can have these needles showing the ADF and the VOR, and I think that's now been enabled in the mod in Microsoft Flight Simulator. But typically, I only have one of these displaying because you're never going to track two. There could be a day you need to, but not always. Gear down and locked. Thanks for subscribing. I hope you're enjoying the stream and enjoy future ones or future videos. Thanks for coming along. Okay, so that's good. APU's now available. We'll just let it warm up a little bit before we put the bleed on because that puts some stress on it. Let's see. Give it a second. I think the buses are gone, so we'll get rid of all that ground stuff. Idle. Excellent. Right, so push back from here, probably to face south, and then we can head out. I think I need another chart ready for this. Let's get a slightly better taxi chart. I was trying to cheat and use the airport one, but you are better off with a proper chart like this to give you the real names. Here we go. So yeah, November 4. Let's take us south. Excellent. The wind should be straight across as we take off, which is fine, only about 9 knots. Right, what I will do is run through my little generic Airbus checklist that we have. So cockpit prep, let's just check we've done all of the things we need to do for that. We should turn on that. And I think that's pretty much ready to go. Yeah, that is completed. Gear pins and covers removed. Signs definitely on and auto. ADIs are obviously in nav and aligned. Fuel quantity we've checked and it's balanced at 11 tons. Takeoff data we've set. PF would have performance page here and it is all set in there. Barrow ref set to QNH 1002, about 100 feet elevation, which we know is good for us today. Next is going to be below the line, but I'll wait till we've got that APU bleed on. So let's turn it on, get some air going in for the passengers. It's very important these days to keep airflow through the cabin. And we can see that. This is a nice page actually. You know, it's certainly since the new simulator, it's made me appreciate how much effort ToLiss have put into this. So we get this flow of air. So we've got the APU valve is in line now, so it's taking the air through and supplying it. And this is pack 1, this is pack 2. These are the bleeds from the engine. So they're shut off at the moment because the engines aren't running. So we're getting pressure from the APU, which goes through here. It's going, amazingly, it's going into the packs at sort of 160 degrees Celsius because it's just hot air coming out of the APU engine, basically. It's compressed. So there's been no ignition. That's just hot air because of the way it's being compressed by the jet engine before it gets ignited. It then gets sent into the air conditioning packs, which pump it out at sort of 4 or 5 degrees, really cold. And then it goes into the cabin and it's sent in these 3 zones, and there's a hot air valve which can use some warmer air to top it up. So you basically get cold air coming out of those packs, and then the airplane adjusts the temperature by trickling in more and less hot air. Yeah, so there you go. Quite a strange system, I know, but that's just how it tends to work. Yeah, and people often think that the air in these airplanes is recycled. but it's just pumped in all the time from the engines. There is a recirculation fan, so there is some circulation of the air, but it's a lot of it's just pumped straight through and out again. So there you go. No, I don't know if that's interesting, but there you go. Just jumping into the chat, a few more people joining in. So thanks for coming along. Bob's Aviation, trying to move into the Airbus a little more from Boeing. I know Boeing has an LNAV feature that follows your route. Does Airbus have LNAV? Yes, it does. And basically that is this. When we have dash, 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 it's in nav. So you push that switch away from you and it will be in nav, which is why we have nav here. So we'll see that when we go flying as well. But absolutely. Rishab is asking which airline I fly for. I don't say it on the stream or publicly at all, just because a few reasons. It's partly to keep privacy, but also I don't want to be interpreted as representing anybody else. This is entirely my own views, and of course none of this is for any real world use. It's just for our fun. Yeah, we just don't discuss it that on the streams. Alpin LT, thanks for subscribing and thanks for coming along. Right. What I'll do is I'm going to get us underway, and I'll try and answer some questions on the way. So apologies if you've asked something and I missed it, but yeah, it's quite a bit of a longer flight than normal. So let's get ourselves underway. So finally, better pushback. Let's go to pre-plan. I think we can just say connect first. Now someone else might be able to help me here. I can't get the audio to work with the better pushback. It just sort of appears. It used to talk to me. I don't know what's changed in my setup now. So if anyone knows or has seen this problem before, please do let me know what the fix is. There we go. I think though things are looking good. Yeah, almost ready to go. Where's our tug gone? There he is, connecting up. Fantastic. Right, let's jump in the flight deck. Yeah, so it's a bit of a shame. I can't really hear them saying anything now. Gear down and lock says, what are your sound settings? Well, I think it's pretty much as you'd expect, but I mean, all the other sounds seem to work. But if I go to better pushback, preferences, this is how it's set. But yeah, I don't seem to be able to make it work for now. We'll fix that one day. I was pretty late installing that anyway. Thanks for subscribing to Matroland Hall. Thank you for joining us. Maybe radio. Yeah, okay, that could be a good point, Bob's Aviation. Thanks for that. Let's get ourselves underway this time, but that'll be something for me to try for sure. Right, let's start the pushback. I think that looks like a good place to end up, facing south. Let's go. So we'll go below the line. Windows and doors are closed. We've got the beacon on. Mobile phones will be off. Thrust lever's definitely at idle. Very important, this one. Make sure that's at 0. Otherwise, when you start the engines, they'll just spool up to wherever you leave them. And parking brake is set. Now I'm hoping he's about to call us. It looks like they've raised us because our nose is slightly higher. So let's go for the brake release. Fingers crossed that works. It's all gone quiet. Oh, there we go. No, they hit that clunk. I should have removed the external power. So yeah, you would get a clunk like that if you forgot to do that. Wow, here we go. Excellent. This takes me back. Yeah, we used to have this a lot in the ToLiss and better pushback. Aviaman, thanks for coming along. I'm doing very well. I hope you're doing well. Aviaman is another streamer and a founding member, along with Dougal, of the Simwings support group. They run basically fundraisers to help people get into flight simulation who might not otherwise be able to, and they help them get computers and gear and so on if they, like I said, otherwise can't do it themselves. So yeah, very nice of those guys. They put a lot of work into that. So thanks for coming along, Aviaman. Hope you're doing very well over in Florida, I believe. Pilot Ovis, maybe Ovice, I'm not sure, but thank you for coming along. I hope I got that right in one of those, and thanks for joining us today. And Niku, thanks for joining us and subscribing. I hope you enjoy the video. Right, back we go. Right, I shouldn't stop talking. Let's start an engine. So, engine 2, Now this is another thing that's really useful. I talk about this in several of my videos on the new Microsoft Flight Simulator, but starting engine process, you set that to ignition, this page comes up, which is all good. And then we're going to start master 2, that goes on, and we start the clock to check timing. The valve goes in line and it starts pumping air, spinning the N2, which will eventually start turning N1 slowly. After a while of doing that, and once the EGT cools down, it will chuck in some fuel and start igniting it. So yeah, it's all pretty modelled very well here. Liz05, thank you very much for the £2 donation. I see we've got the zombie running along this time, so I haven't managed to fiddle with notifications, but that's very kind of you. Thank you, Liz. Drew Maxwell, thanks for subscribing. I hope you're enjoying the videos. There we go, that's spooling up. We hear a clunk as the generator comes online. Seems like the pushback is finished, so we'll set the brake. The valve is across now, it's done its bits, it doesn't need to be in line anymore. And here we are sitting here with an engine available. Excellent. Let's start engine 1. And you know, it's amazing how complex these processes are, you know, in all the systems of the aircraft, and it's great to see somebody take the time to model it all for us. So let's have a look outside while that spools up. There we go, fantastic. Tara Dermody says, what is N1 and N2? N1 is the front fan, that's called N1. So that is what the N1 gauge tells us, and it gives us the most thrust. That's why it's such a relevant number for us to see. N2 is the fan behind it. So it's the second stage. They're both compressing stages effectively, but the fan provides a lot of thrust by sending a lot of cold air. You can see it from the back, although the engines are starting out, it's a little harder. The core is this little silvery bit here, that's the hot engine, and then this rest around here is all cold air being sent out through the fan. So it's pretty important, and that's why we end up using N1 and N2. You'll see it in the IAE engines, EPR, engine pressure ratio, which is something slightly different, and thankfully it's not as easy to use as N1. So even in an aircraft with the EPR gauges, it's quite easy to look at N1. So as we can see, 20.5% of their maximum is the current N1 speed. N2 sits a bit higher, 61%. It doesn't change quite as much, strangely. Aviaman, thank you very much. That's very kind of you for the $5. So thank you for the super chat. It's just something new I've added, and I don't fully understand it, so I do apologise. But thank you all thank you, Aviaman, for that. That's very kind of you. I hope you're doing well over in Florida. Like I say, I hope the weather's improved for you. Okay, so that started up. We would have had our wave off from the ground crew, so we set that back to norm. Get rid of that APU bleeds. And we'll get rid of the master switch. We'll turn on the engine anti-ice for today. Then we'll come down here, arm the ground spoilers, and set our trim. Trim today, CG 21.7. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh goodness, let's see if I can. Yes, I can just about remember the camera views. 21.7. Scroll. Which, as we can see, is up. So we get the CG here and we get up and down, so it's much easier to use the CG percentage, because otherwise one up and one down you could just get confused with it. So thankfully the percentage is far easier. So there we go, 20.7 somewhere there. Frankly, the trim doesn't change the feel on takeoff at all, because you set the trim and then it pretty much feels the same each time. But there we go. Right, so that is done. It's a long taxi. Let's get ourselves moving. No air traffic to talk to, so we'll put those lights on and let's go have a look outside. Make sure it's clear all around. And before we do that, of course, what am I doing? We need to get the flaps out. Obviously, flaps out, transponder can go there. And we'll run our after start checklist. So after start, engine anti-ice we've got on. ECAM status is checked. All we're checking is that there's nothing there. Pitch trim is set. And rudder trim is set to 0. Tom Harvey, thank you very much for donating through Super Chat. I mean, £10. I mean, that's incredibly generous. Thank you very much for doing it, and thank you for coming along and viewing it and supporting the channel from the start. It's really kind of you guys. I mean, as I said, this is just a bit of fun, and there's absolutely, obviously, the videos are going to come whether or not we get subscriptions and so on. But yeah, I don't really know what to say. Thank you very much, Tom. Your content is oh yeah, well, that's very kind. Content is definitely the best out there. Much appreciated. That's very kind of you, Tom. Thank you. And Andy H1302. Good to see we can now support the channel. Thanks for the hard work. That's very kind, Andy. Thank you so much for helping us. Yeah, it's thanks to you guys that I've had the motivation to do this the whole time. Again, the channel will continue whether or not it's not required at all. So if you have better uses for any of your hard-earned money, of course, please do that with it. But it's greatly appreciated. So let's go forwards, left November, and down Echo, which, as we can see here, and I'm going to do a taxi tutorial because it seems to be something that's slightly missing and confusing to people new to things, and I can see why. It actually takes quite a while to learn when you're starting out as a pilot. Effectively, we're going to go forwards, and taxi symbols are always orientated so that they are the next thing. So November 4 to the left, it means that the taxiway behind that sign is November 4. Hugo, thanks for subscribing. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy the stream. Right, I think we're done now. So, parking brake released. That one. Let's get ourselves underway. We can go and do some of the other bits once we are a bit further along. Right, let's see if I've got these controls. It is nice to have a working hat switch, which I know in Flight Simulator still is not there. We'll just do a quick brake check. So we just squeeze the brakes and check it engages. You don't need to bring the aircraft to a stop. In fact, it's not really preferable to do that because the cabin crew could end up tripping over because they're usually walking around at this stage. So we have to be very careful with things like that. Brian Humphreys has donated 99 cents through Super Chat. Thank you very much. Very kind of you, Brian. Thanks for your support on the channel with a nice emoji. Okay, so November 4, just check there's no one out there and around, is behind that sign. So we're going to take this left, which will be November 4. So yeah, so I definitely think a taxi tutorial will be quite good. Something we can definitely do in either X-Plane or Microsoft Flight Simulator. It will be valid for both because they both have very good taxiway markings and visuals. Absolutely. I suppose the more difficult thing is in Flight Simulator, you're going to have to be able to do it without charts unless you have the Navigraph app separately, because I don't think there's an integrated tablet like this, which I saw someone question in the chat. But yeah, it's a really handy feature to have, but it's definitely possible to taxi without one. You wouldn't really want to, but if you follow the signs, it is possible. So the next one, let's see if we can do it. We want to go right on Echo 4. So we should see Echo 4 with an arrow right, and then the next taxiway after that sign will be the one we want. Right, as we taxi out, we've got performance on PF side, we've got flight plan on PM side, pretty typical. Let's go ahead and do some flight controls. So full down, full up, you might hear the joystick creaking. Neutral, full left, full right, neutral, and hopefully if I remember my buttons, that's the disconnect. Yes it is. Full right, full left, neutral. Ravi Chang, subscribe. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the stream. Right, next step is going to be a right turn down Echo 4. And the H1302, it's very kind of you again. And yes, the cat has been fed, so fingers crossed that we won't get too interfered with today like we have in several of my previous streams. And now I think the video I'm working on at the moment has the cat makes an appearance. Or was it my last video? I think it was my last video actually. Jelly Van der Veen, or is that Hele? I'm not sure how no, it can't be in Dutch, I'm assuming, but I hope I got that roughly right. There's Echo 4. Right, did we get a sign? There it is, Echo 4. So now the next taxiway to the right, that'll be us. Keeping the speed 10 knots-ish for 90-degree turns like this, really. Squeeze that on, there we go. The Airbus will run away from you as you taxi with the IE engines. They just have enough idle thrust, especially if you have engine anti-ice on, it will actually taxi even faster. So the trick is you let it accelerate and then you squeeze the brakes down to slow speed like 10 knots and then you let it accelerate. You want to reduce the number of applications of the brakes because we end up using a lot more carbon brakes when they're cold and through applications. Dara Dermody, that's very kind of you, 5 years. Thank you very much for helping the channel and supporting us. It's very kind of you. I didn't expect all this support, but thank you. Speedy K, thanks for subscribing. I hope you enjoyed the videos. Right, now we're heading down. Next step is going to be to cross the runway. It is an active runway. It could be used for takeoff, and you'll get the big clue on the taxiways, these nice big red signs. So we're going to stop and certainly not go over that without clearance from air traffic control. A common thing for people to do is to put on the strobe lights as you cross active runways. Some people put on all the lights. It's another option. Just make yourself as visible as possible in case someone out there is on approach. It might help draw their eyes to you. Andrevu90, thanks for subscribing. Thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoy the stream and the videos. Right, there we go then. So we get clearance from air traffic control, which we'd say we've got. You're also going to look out left and right, and we are going to stick on those strobe lights so we are flashing away. And let's get a nice window view as we roll across here. There we go. Strobes lighting up the ground. I do like that in X-Plane. So you may notice this sort of thing as you're taxiing around as a passenger. And it can turn sort of a relatively short taxi into or even a simple taxi into quite a long experience if you're having to cross runways and all sorts of things like that all the time. Thomas Smith, thanks for subscribing. I hope you enjoy it. That is a Dutch name. Gele, something like that. But sorry, I do try, but yeah, I'm not as familiar with Dutch as some other languages. But there we go. Right, we've done that. Pilot monitoring we'll do theirs and put on the brakes. Let's have that to TAR8. Let's have the weather radar system 1 and the predicted wind shear to auto. Good. We're going to ding the cabin crew. Bing bong, which I noticed the Microsoft Flight Simulator mod now uses a similar setup, which is quite neat. Of course, in real life, it doesn't work like that. They will just let you know they're ready by setting this to ready with their switch in the cabin. It's not a command we can give. It's just it's for the cabin crew to tell us when they are. And takeoff config test. There we go. Right, I think we're pretty much there. Oh, keep it steady. So yeah, so I'll just let it accelerate. Don't have to use the brakes. Engines are warm. They've had 5 minutes. 3 minutes is all that's required if they are warm already. As in, if you parked up within 2 hours, then you only need to run them for 3 minutes. Soon we're going to be into winter operations. I mean, we can have some really low temperatures, which will require engine run-ups, checking for vibration, de-icing. It's a bit of a shame we don't have a way to do proper de-icing yet, but it's something I'll have a think about. Definitely something we can talk about, no doubt. I know the FS Labs in P3D does have some of these facilities. Bob's Aviation says, it's making a custom livery difficult. Yeah, it can take a bit of time, especially with all these curved surfaces. I had help with this one, absolutely. And you can see that, yeah, getting this curve here was difficult. We ended up moving the line above because trying to make a line that runs on this wing box is really, really difficult. I know a few of people on the Discord have done liveries and they've done fantastic jobs. Same at the back here. This section is obviously very hard. Some parts are a little bit straightforward, like the windows are nice. You can just put a straight line across there. But yeah, it does take a little bit of time, a bit of detail. But it's good fun. Fly24, £4.20. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much for the support on the channel. Yeah, it's like I said, it's if you have any better use for your hard-earned money, please do put it to that. But thank you for the support on the channel. Donald Hoskins has a good question. Will you be looking into VR setup in the future? Now, I really like VR. The times I've tried it, I really enjoy it. I've never used it in X-Plane, but I know there's some YouTubers who do VR. My question with VR is, for the sake of the channel and for what you guys would like to see, would anyone be interested in virtual reality content? I don't have the ability to do it just yet, but our computer wouldn't really run it, I don't think, very well. But also, would you guys enjoy watching it? Because from what I could tell, it might be a little bit difficult to see what's going on because of the head constantly moving around and that sort of thing. And of course, it would ruin my ability to join in with the chat for live streams. But it could be interesting for some videos. So I don't know. You guys let me know, that sort of thing. Right, let's come around to this holding point 1901 and see if we are ready to go. We have a checklist we do need to run. And even 10 knots there, you can see, is quite sporty. Right, let's get ourselves right up to the line. Set the parking brake, and let's run the before takeoff checklist. Before takeoff, we've done the flight control checked on both sides. We've checked our flight instruments. Briefing has been, well, let's do that. So we're going to take off. We're going to go northerly. We've got a 210 knot speed restriction before making our right turn. So we're going to keep out flap 1, which is pre-selected, and we're going to have 200 knots, which is pre-selected. That's what I meant to say. Got our speeds loaded in, 162, 165. Climb and nav have armed correctly. 1 and FD2 is there. We've got a stop altitude to become a flight level 130 as we head over the terrain. We're going to continue straight ahead, or if we've already made our right turn, we'll turn downwind. We won't keep heading over the island if we have an engine failure. We are pretty heavy. I think we're above the, well, it depends on the aircraft, possibly above the max landing weight for an immediate return, but there we go. Chris H has donated €5. Thank you very much. I hope it isn't your last €5. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Oh yeah, I must see. I'm not very good at this. Fly24 said super chat, super channel, super stream, super vid. So that's very kind, Fly24. I must remember to read the messages. But there we go. Okay, so we've done the briefing. Flap setting config 1% is green and set, and that's what we asked for. Config 1. FMA takeoff data. We've got the speeds. Climb and nav are armed. 152. Transponder is set. Ecam memos takeoff no blue. A typical way. A lot of airlines will use that phrase, takeoff no blue. Just means you can look down and it just stands out, obviously, if there's anything wrong. Cabin is secured for takeoff. Engine mode selector normal. It's not raining, not severe turbulence. I would hope you probably wouldn't want to take off into severe turbulence anyway. TCAS is TARA, which is correct. TA only because we are too low. Down here, TA is all you'll get. And packs will be on for today's takeoff. Right, that's it. It's clear on the approach. Let's get ourselves underway. Right, brakes released. He says, yep. Oh no. I'm pressing the wrong thing. Got to get used to this. Slightly different from Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yeah, we are. You can feel the weight of the airplane, keeping 34%, and it's just creeping along. Often it's uphill onto runways because they'll be angled slightly just to drain the water off. Just it's typical to the camera on a road, really. So usually you have to go up a slight gradient to get over onto them, which can make life difficult, especially if air traffic have asked you for an expeditious takeoff because they've got someone on approach. Right. Could be an evening flight by the time we get over to Edinburgh. Right, we're ready to go, so let's do a rolling takeoff. So start the clock. Side stick half forwards. Get ourselves a bit straighter. 50% N1. And takeoff. So click. Click. Man flex 37. SRS runway. Order thrust is blue, which is armed. And you can see speed select 200 written there. It's ready for us later on when we get in the air. 80 to 100 knots now, so start releasing that side stick to neutral. Sitting at neutral now. It's not a very precise measurement, roughly there. 100 knots you're going to check from the other pilot to make sure you're still alive and that your airspeed is all working fine. Oh, just try and use the rudder properly. There we go. Very fast takeoff. There's V1 and rotate. The little blue donut is rotate, so 3 degrees a second. Positive climb, gear up, nav. Oh, that's a bit of a right turn, but we know we're going roughly straight, so you don't overreact to the flight directors initially. And away we go, roaring up. Fantastic. And you can see that V2 is high. I would still expect it to be somewhere around the 140 mark. Sorry, the 150 mark. I love the BSS sounds, really nice. Okay, there we go. Climb, lever climb, so back 1 click. Thrust climb, climb, auto thrust. Keep lowering that nose. And autopilot 1 is engaged. Now we're going to keep that 200 knots, which is great, until we round this turn. The reason we start the timer is we don't want to run the engines at takeoff thrust for more than 5 minutes. If you have an engine failure, you're allowed to run it for 10 minutes on the live engine, but on a normal takeoff, 5 minutes is all you get. Now it's going to really start climbing as it goes around this turn, but you'll see we're keeping 1+ F, which is good. Sometimes turbulence will mean that your speed increases through the 210 anyway, and all your best efforts get ruined and the flaps retract. And like I said, it's no big deal. In fact, to prove that, I'm just going to select 210, which is what the airplane would have done. And we'll just see what happens, see if it's any different for us. It's creeping up. So as soon as it brushes through that 210, there they go, flaps retract in, and you'll see the pitch rising and rising and rising. So obviously some people don't like that much. But the magic is, because the slats are out, you can see that the low speed warnings don't actually appear yet, because it's not a concern. The slats allow us to have a much higher angle of attack. Okay, so let's go to manage speed. It's time for us to accelerate. Get above the green S, we can put the flaps to 0. We don't want to bring the flaps to 0 until we have an accelerating speed. So we need that trend arrow up. So there it is, trend arrow up, above the S speed. Bring those flaps to 0, which we've done. And now you'll see the low speed indicators, so that's VLS, start to appear. We're going up to a flight level, so set standard. And away we go. Once that's done, let's disarm the ground spoilers. And let's get rid of those nose lights. Ah, there we go. We missed the lights. Those are memory things. There we go. Engine anti-ice was probably not required, really. We haven't actually entered the cloud like I thought we would. Weather's a bit nicer than I expected. So here we go, off on our Oscom departure. 130 by KF 416. So we needed 2,000 feet per minute. We're doing 2.5. I mean, once these planes are clean and doing 250 knots, they have a really excellent rate of climb. We can also double check that if we go to the FMGC, these magenta asterisks mean we are going to make the restrictions. Only just though, 132, and if I click on the right key, it says out constraint above flight level 130, FL 130 with a plus. So yeah, we are just about going to make it. Hopefully we'll be cleared a bit higher. So let's go all the way up to our cruise at flight level 350. And you can see all these magenta asterisks tell us we're making these restrictions, because there's quite a few because of the terrain. If they were amber, that would mean we are not going to make the restrictions. Just looking into the chat briefly. Actually, we'll run the after takeoff checklist, shall we? Not all airlines have an after takeoff checklist, but I've got one here on my generic one. So after takeoff checklist, a landing gear is up, which it is indeed. One of the few things we don't get an ECAM warning about. It just would appear up here. So it actually is noisy, and you'd hope you wouldn't miss it. But yeah, there's no ECAM specific to it. So landing gear is up, flaps are retracted, and they're up here at 0. The packs are both on, and the barrier is set to standard. We're through flight level 100 now, so it's going to accelerate to en route climb 335. Absolutely fine. As the nose is now lowered, we can release the passengers expecting smooth conditions. Radnav was already empty. Secondary can just be a copy. There we go. Yeah, so some questions we've got are... is that FMGC Tails or Honeywell? I think I think this is roughly modelled on a Honeywell, but I'm not entirely sure. It's slightly different to what I'm used to. A few things are slightly different, and the difference between the two is very minor anyway. Very minor indeed. David, DG27, a long-time viewer of the channel. Thanks for coming along, and that's very kind of you for your £10 super chat. Thank you very much, and a fantastic emoji to join in with that. So thank you for all your support. Right since the start, David's been a big help on the channel, always commenting, always joining in. So thanks for your support, David. Magpie says landing lights off. Yes, Magpie has absolutely right. God, I'm doing terrible with lights today. They go off and retracted. As we know on the Airbus, they stick out in the airflow, they rumble away. No speed limitation. They do cause a little bit of extra fuel burn and of course a bit of noise in the cabin. I need to adjust my setup slightly because I'm struggling to read the chat with the way my microphone is now in the way. So I'm let me see if I can just move my desktop around. Oh no, don't do that. Let's see. Okay, maybe this will work. DG27, no, you're very welcome. Thanks for all your support and enthusiasm over the time. Captain Reynolds, thanks for coming along. I hope you're, sounds like you've been working a lot, so thanks for joining us. External view says, the biggest problem with my joystick setup at the moment is the thrust levers. There we go, climb. Yeah, let's have an external view, definitely. Cap3586, thanks for subscribing. I hope you enjoy the stream. Let's have a passenger view as well. There we go. Oh, bit grey outside for that. What is the buzzing noise on takeoff, says Karma Curry? Probably the engines, that sort of buzzsaw sound. The IAE engines do make this sort of hum/buzzing noise. It's quite common. The NEO engines don't, so it's sort of been reduced these days. They're a bit quieter. Run Pilot Aviation, thanks for joining us. Bob's Aviation, they're having difficulty with frame rate. Yes, as Dougal says, good places for the Discord. There's a lot of help on there. Swappy, yes, thank you very much for your donation. I'm afraid I don't recognise the currency. I can't even name it. I would love to try, but thank you very much. It's very kind of you. And Swappy has been a big support on the channel and on the Discord for the whole time as well. Big Discord user, so thank you for joining in all the time. Dominic Ueri, thank you for subscribing. I hope you enjoy the video. Leonidas says, what about wing anti-ice? Good question. So the wing anti-ice we don't need to use unless we see ice appear up here on this little, it's called a spigot, I suppose. So unless we see ice on the airframe, we don't need to turn it on. All it does is heat up these outer 3 slats. So it doesn't do a whole lot else. It doesn't heat up the tail, it doesn't do anything else. So we've got the engines protected, and then we need to do those if required. The magic of the Airbus is in flight, the way it flies through, and typical of swept-wing jetliners is they just don't pick up much ice, so it's quite rare to actually need it. Wally Gamer, thanks for your subscription. Oh, I'm missing a few subscriptions now, so thank you very much. Swappy, yes, this is the Indian currency, so thank you very much, Swappy, that's very kind of you. Rupees, of course, yeah, of course. Oh, there's a sudden weather change. Andy is using blue tack. That might be a good idea, because I use the HOTAS Thrustmaster for the PlayStation, and the thrust lever is fine. It has its own detent in the middle, but sadly that means that this isn't in the detent, so it tends to topple forwards randomly. Zed, thank you for your subscription. I hope you enjoy the videos. Right, just see. I'm sure I missed a whole load of questions here, guys. So if you do have one, do please feel free to ask again, and I'll hopefully get around to them whenever we get the chance. Good question from Mo Gamma is it vital that the front wheel of the gear must be on the yellow line mostly when taxiing, or some deviations fine? It's not vital. You want to be near the yellow line. You want to put the yellow line running roughly in between your screens, and that should be close to the centre line. Taxi lights are big chunks of metal. They make a lot of noise and they bang, especially on a light aeroplane, so you'll feel the bang. So most pilots will avoid the taxi lights if they can, and that's the same on takeoff. If you can sit your wheel just to the left or right, and I mean very slightly, and avoid them, then that's always quite nice, a bit smoother for the passengers as well. Otherwise you get the bang 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 as you're rolling down the runway, which isn't always that pleasant. It's not an issue if you do, it's not dangerous or anything like that, so but being ever so slightly left or right is fine. Obviously it's your responsibility to stay on the taxiway and within the limits of the wingspan clearances and so on will be based on you being on the centre line, so you do have to be careful. As Bjorn says, good evening from Norway. So I hope you're doing well in Norway. I hope it's not too cold and snowy over there just yet. And they ask, good question. I'm doing fine. I hope you're doing fine as well, as Bjorn. But what's the difference between an A321 from an A320 when hand flying? And it's a good question. Essentially, nothing. They are controlled in the same way. The side stick does the same things, so it commands a G-force. So when you pull back on the side stick, you're asking for a higher G-force, and when you lower the nose, you're asking for a lower G-force. Some of the speeds are different. It's obviously heavier, so some of the numbers are different. The fuel system's different, but actually when you disconnect the autopilot and bank, you're commanding the same roll rates, the left and right, so it responds in exactly the same way. Having said that, there is a difference in the landing. It's a heavier airplane with more momentum, so it can take a slightly earlier flare can be required typically, and also it doesn't get affected by the wind as much or turbulence, so a lot of people like to fly it for that reason. because it's heavier, it has more momentum through the air. You know, we're 76 tons. If you're on a 319, you could be sort of in the 50s. So it does make a difference. Rem, thanks for subscribing. I hope you enjoy the video. So at normal speeds, not much. On final approach, not too much, but that momentum you have to account for when you actually go through and land. And you'll know you're in a 321 probably just from the way it rides the bumps a bit smoother and isn't as affected by the wind. Okay, we don't need the timer anymore. I can see it's clear skies outside, so engine anti-ice can go off. Absolutely not required. Scott Keeley says, do you have to be at cruising altitude to turn off the passenger sign? That will be an airline procedure. Airlines will all decide. Cloud8, thanks for subscribing. I hope you enjoyed the video. Yeah, that would be an airline procedure, so it's up to them. I know airlines that turn it off in the climb, and I know airlines that don't turn it off until the cruise. So it does depend. No one would. You want to make sure you've got your nose down. You don't want to have a high pitch of over 10 degrees, because if the cabin crew are walking around or people are going to the toilet, they will feel that angle, and it can be quite hard to walk up that hill or down that hill. So things like that we will account for if you're still banking around. Typically, though, turns aren't much of an issue because we turn at a coordinated turn. If you don't really notice it unless you look out the windows, you just feel a slight increase in G-force. So slightly different. Geordie, long time viewer, thanks Geordie for all your support, and that's 5 years. It's very kind of you. Thank you. That's very kind of you to support. And pedagogical. Oh dear, I'm going to embarrass myself now. I'm not sure what that word means, which I'm sure is why Geordie has has passed it through. Got a question here. I think I've seen this come up twice from Dara. It says, how are citizen stars assigned? Are they known in advance of the flight, or are they assigned by the departure and arrival ATCs? They are typically, it depends. There's actually been a discussion on our Discord. In Europe, you'll know roughly which SID or star to expect because you know which runway you're expecting, but it will be based on the runway. So, for example, out of Iceland, we were going to depart and use Oscum as our departure point. So all we had to do was work out which runway we're departing from. If we'd been using a different runway, I think it would be like this one. I hope. Yeah, so if we departed off the easterly runway, then we would fly a different Oscum departure because it just is applicable to that runway. So you can typically tell like that. Joda says, as an A320 pilot, can you technically fly any other Airbus like A350? Technically, no. So the license is for the A320 family. You can have an additional part added. This came up in a stream before and somebody pointed out, I basically said you can only fly one family at a time, but someone did point out you could fly a A330 and an A320. Now you'd have to do some extra training to do that, and then you have to fly the A330 a certain amount of times, a month or a year and so on, to keep it valid, but your license isn't automatically going to cover you for both. The A320 license does not cover the A350. It's just possible to have it added on. You couldn't have a license for the A320 and the 747, and things like that don't really happen. Scott has asked, do you prefer FSX, Microsoft Flight Simulator, X-Plane, or P3D for sim commercial Airbus flying specifically? I don't have P3D. I do have FSX, which I had some detailed Airbuses on, but compared to FSX, I prefer X-Plane. I like the handling and I like the ToLiss model better. I think the graphics outside are nicer, the visuals for landing and so on, and the runways and the airports are all much nicer than the default FSX ones are. I haven't used P3D. I know that P3D has probably the most complicated and advanced Airbus simulation in it, so P3D is probably the known as the best way to use the Airbus, but I haven't got P3D. I just have X-Plane. Genuine MP5 is that's You're very welcome. I'm glad the videos have helped you get used to the A320 NEO from Microsoft Flight Simulator. I knew they used that in a lot of their marketing material, and I'm just glad it's a very different aeroplane. And when I first flew it before I was a pilot in one of the old flight simulators, I remember being totally confused about some really basic stuff. I didn't know how to start the engines. I couldn't work any of it out. I was like, well, how do the thrust levers move when I'm taxiing and things like that? I thought, now I do know that stuff, it would be quite nice to share it online. So yeah, thanks for the comment. Thanks for watching. Swappy S says, I think the A350, 380 and 340 is under one family. That may be true. I certainly know the 380 and 350, you can definitely fly both of those. Maybe without special training, I don't know that. But certainly you can swap between those two. They're similar big long-haul aircraft. Scott Keeley has a good question. Do pilot training sims use something like P3D, or do airlines manufacturers develop their own? I'm sure someone will know more on this than I do, but I have never seen P3D used in the standard full flight simulators that airlines use. No, they will be custom built typically by these manufacturers who produce these simulators. Now the visuals do get better and better, so the newest simulators coming out these days have visuals better than P3D, but there are still simulators in use that you'll see that have worse visuals. But what they do all have in common is they have screens that are, I've forgotten the name for it now, it's begins with a C, there is a word for it which I'm sure some of you will know, which means that you can actually, it's basically 3D, so you can you can move your perspectives, you can focus close or far away, things like that. It's very clever. Is it collimated? Something like that. So typically no, it's not P3D, because I'm not even sure if that supports that. Fuzzy Condor says, are the 3 clicks after autopilot disengage modelled? Yes, they are. Are those 3 clicks a mode change on the FMA? Yes, it is. You pretty much summed it up perfectly. We can do it now. Let's if I disconnect the autopilot, press it once to disconnect. You get the warning. Press again. Oh no, we won't get a triple click now, because the reason is, let's put it back in. It's a mode reversion, as you said, on the FMAs. So the reason you get a triple click on landing is that this will be in land and it will be Cat 3 dual. If you have both autopilots, Cat 3 single. If you have one, as soon as you disconnect the autopilot, the capability drops to Cat 1, which is a change, so it tells you by reverting. Yeah, so that's why that is. So the triple click is telling you there's been a reversion. I quite like the triple click sound, actually. It's I don't know, I find it sort of pleasing to listen to. Click, click, click. And there's our last 1,000 feet to go, so we'll make sure we get the level off right. To be honest, with that cost index, I thought we'd have worse climb performance, but we're doing quite well. Doing quite well indeed. Still doing 800 feet per minute. I mean, up here, 500 feet per minute, not uncommon. You could even have worse if you had any sort of wind change up here. You can see the airplane level off, quite common. Fuzzy Condor, you're very welcome. Sean Pullin says, does the normal controller introduce side slip when rolling, or is it automatically compensated for? It is automatically compensated for. The autopilot has control of the rudder, so it can do coordinated turns, and in the Airbus, in normal law, if you disconnect the autopilot and start turning, it will coordinate the turn. Now there's not much side slip in a jet airliner anyway. They don't have so much of it, but it's coordinated for. You've also got yaw dampers built in to most swept-wing aircraft to stop Dutch roll, that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's plenty of systems working in the background, but the Airbus is unique. It does everything. Mac out cruise. Right, let's get that TCAS. Let's not do it wrong. Let's not accidentally go to toga for once. Let's move over here. Put that to below. Back into the flight deck. Let's have our systems check. Engines looking good. Again, like I say, this is a rare gauge. I've not seen this before. This is a very well specified Airbus. But yeah, all looking very reasonable. 67 degrees oil. Vibrations are low. anything above sort of 2 or 3 and you'd start to notice it, it'd be quite noticeable, but 0.8, 1, something like that in the cruise is quite normal, perfectly acceptable. There are limits, and if these numbers go too high, you'll actually get an advisory on the ECAM, which instead of being a status message is ADV up here, and it starts to warn you there's an issue coming. Bleed air, as we see, all looking good. High pressure valve is closed because we don't need it, we're just using the intermediate pressure because the engines are at high thrust, so the intermediate pressure is good enough. When we go into our descent, it will have to use high pressure to keep the pressure up. Pressurization page, 130 foot landing elevation. Is it 130 foot in Edinburgh? It might be. Seems slightly higher than I remember, but there we go. So that's the landing elevation automatically selected. Differential pressure, typically 8 as a maximum. If you climb now, you'll find that the cabin actually climbs at a similar rate to you climb because it has to only go up to 8 as a maximum PSI. The valve is slightly open, so that's letting some air out. As I say, pumping in lots of air, letting the rest drain out through that outflow valve. Electrical page working well. IDG temperature usually appears down here. There's a fuel oil heat exchanger, so the fuel is warmed up by going through a heat exchanger that helps cool down the IDGs. These are the generators. They help drive the generators from the engines. Very important pieces of equipment. Hydraulics all looking good. I said before, in flight these usually aren't a level like this. One will be lower, one will be higher, because once the gear's up, because they're obviously in different positions, it changes where the hydraulic fluid will be, and it takes it out of the reservoir slightly. Fuel is nice and balanced. Let's do a fuel check. So we've got 8.7, 9.7, 10.7, 11, which is what we set off from Iceland with. Excellent. APU's off. Condition page. It's got the temperature under control now. Doors are all closed. Arms, wheels, yeah, fine. Flight controls all in the green. You'd definitely get an ECAM if many of these failed, so you'd soon know. You wouldn't really need to see it there. But there we go. And I've done it again. Just every time I try and change the view to something. Let's have a wing view. There we go. Just leave it there for a second. Yes, as someone's pointing out, and I've only recently found out, people recommended it in my on comments on my last video, that you can have pop-out windows in Microsoft Flight Simulator. You have to press the right Alt and then is it a right click? Something like that, and then you pop out the window. But it does load it in a completely new window, so it's not quite like this. It's an actual window. So if you, for example, are making videos like I was, it won't appear in your software or your recording software unless you also capture the other window, whereas in X-Plane it's all part of the app. Question from Dom is, do you plan to do more Flight Simulator videos? Yes, I do, and they would be happy to see how the holding pattern works. I have done a holding pattern video months ago. It was one of the first ones I did, because it was quite heavily requested back then, and it seems to be quite heavily requested now. The downside is the NEO in Microsoft Flight Simulator sadly still doesn't support it, that I can tell. So you could do holds, but you'd have to do it in the old school manual way, which is a lot of calculating. It's not what we ever do in real life. If you were having to do manual holds in a jet airliner because of a systems degradation or an issue like that, you would typically try and get radar vectors or something from air traffic control instead, just to free up your capacity, because it would involve one pilot being totally continuously calculating and adjusting, trying to stay in the hold. Now it is possible, but really we would use the computers to do it, because it's not not a very good balance of capacity to have to spend so much work trying to fly a hold. So I could maybe consider doing one like that, but I'm hoping they'll add it properly with the updates, and then we can do it like that. David DG27 says, have we got failures on today? Yes, we do. We do. But I haven't seen any so far in the ToLiss. I should probably increase the factor. I think I had it. Well, let's see. You can all tell if I've been making that up now. Fault scenarios. Yeah, I've increased the factor. I thought a bit. It hasn't made much difference. But we'll see. We could get something. Checkpoint says they're waiting for the TCA officer pack, but it's still not available there. So using a controller. Yeah, a controller is difficult to use Flight Simulator or X-Plane with. The officer pack thrust levers look interesting because if they have a position, a detent for us, instead of having to do what I do now, which is sort of balance it, if you can actually move those to the click and in real life it matches where it goes in the sim, that would be amazing. Now, I don't know how easy that will be to set up, so I'll be very curious to see people's impressions of it when it comes. Helle says, why are some letters in the FMC in squares? North, south, west and east. That's why. If you were typing in coordinates a lot, or having to put in coordinates for oceanic points, then you would do that. We are actually, this would have been oceanic if we were on that sim. We're in MNPS airspace until we exit it. Probably at, let's see, where are we in comparison? Maybe at Bruce, maybe at Ginga. So we would have had to check some waypoints, and you sometimes get just coordinates, lat and longitude, so north, so and so on, east, so and so on. So that's why they're highlighted in case you have to type them in. Turtle Kayak has a good question. How do you get the plus minus switch? You just press it again. Minus plus, minus plus, minus plus. That's how you do that. Fly24 says their first sim failure was the gear not coming down. Does the Airbus have manual gear extension? It does, and it's incredibly easy. It's this lever here. You lift it up and turn it 3 times as part of a checklist, and it would just unlock the gear, open the doors and let it fall down with gravity. It's brilliant. It's so simple, and I've seen some airliners that I've flown where you have to do all sorts of things, but this one is just 3 turns of that handle. It's genius. Richard V, thanks for joining us. Richard V has been another long-term supporter and viewer, so thanks for coming along, Richard. I hope you're doing well. David Porter, thanks for your subscription. I hope you enjoy the stream. Soppy S says flying with a mouse and keyboard is fun. Yeah, it is. It's totally possible as well these days. I sometimes wonder why I bother setting up my joystick. It takes up a lot of space on the desk, and then I use it for not much of the flight, really. I think we'll use it for a bit more later on as we get lower down into Edinburgh. Maybe do a visual approach now the weather's nicer. Lovely calm evening though. Looks like we're setting up for a nice sunset arrival, perhaps. Sorry about that, everyone. Yeah, there we go. So it's a lovely day. Mr. Espresso, my goodness, that's incredibly generous. Thank you. Happy to contribute, Mr. Espresso. That's very kind of you. So thank you for all your enthusiasm and support. Thanks for helping out the channel there, and also in the Discord. Mr. Espresso is another of our loyal users. As I said, the invite is in the description if you'd like to join our Discord, where there's a community working very hard to help out people joining in on the Airbus. I am going to do a refresh. I haven't told anyone this yet, but I am planning to do a refresh of the Discord. So we're going to have a bit more organisation, a bit of structure to some of the sections. But I'm not just going to do it. We're going to do it together. So I'm going to start a little thread, and we'll start talking about ideas for how we want that set up between us. So yeah, that is coming. So it looks a little bit small at the moment because we only have a few sections. For a long time that was fine, but it's just grown a bit now, and especially with 2 flight simulators running in parallel, I think it'll be quite nice that we can separate the 2. What I might do, let's wander over to the sunset side, see if I can do this without causing any problems. Oh, lovely, there we go. Absolutely lovely. Which reminds me of one of my first thumbnails for a full flight. Checkpoint says, why do the engines make that razor noise? It's just a function of the style. I couldn't tell you why. The NEOs don't do it. I don't think the CFMs do it. They have slightly larger fans, so maybe that makes a difference. But the IAE does. It just does. And in an A319, a very short one, you do really hear it, especially at the front. Bick has a good question. What's our expected landing time? So the overlay is saying, what, 1818 Zulus? So that's, where are we now? It's about just over an hour from now. If I go, let's jump back into flight deck. There's some AI traffic. That's quite nice. Oh, look at that. The sun reflects off the contrail as well. Yeah. See, X-Plane still has its moments. Absolutely. Lovely. Right, let's have a look. So, in the real aircraft, even though there's a discontinuity, it would give you estimates, but the ToLiss just doesn't. So yeah, 1838, so probably a bit later actually, because we're going to go round to the south and do a visual in, so just over an hour to go. This is one of our longest flights we've done, but I just thought, nice chilled out time. We haven't had much of a chance to bring everyone together in a live stream for a while, so I thought it'd be quite fun. But yeah, that's the current plan. Maybe a little bit sooner than that. We'll do a nice fast descent, and we'll cut in with a visual. So we're getting lots of questions. Joda says, is it much harder to make a butter landing in the 320 than in bigger plane with double back gear? Now that's a good question. I have not flown a plane with double landing gear. I've only ever flown with the single setup. However, the pilots I've spoken to who have flown with double landing gear, the only issue of that is landing the main wheels, and then you have to land another set of wheels. So I think the 340, I've spoken to someone who flew that, where he said you could make a nice landing with the main wheels, but then the center gear might touch down rougher if you don't control the flare. But I've never done it, so I don't know, to be honest. But certainly on a smaller aircraft with just one set of main wheels, it's probably a little bit easier because you've only got one thing to do. The magic of a 321, because of that extra weight and momentum, we talked about how it makes the characteristics in turbulence and cruise nice. It also has advantages for landing because with the extra weight, you've got extra fuel and passengers, it actually soaks up the bumps for landing a bit nicer as well. So most pilots find it slightly easier to get a smooth feeling landing in a 321. I say smooth feeling because it may not be a different landing rate or anything like that, but it might just feel that bit smoother. I see Mr. Espresso's super chat still counting down, so yeah, thank you again, that's really kind of you. F1 Racer Dan, what is your opinion on the sounds of the 320 NEO on Microsoft Flight Simulator, in particular the engine? Interesting question. I think they're fine. I'm not... There are freeware sound packs for X-Plane that I think are slightly better, but I don't think the A320 NEO sounds are bad in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The best sounds I have are these BSS sound pack for the 321, and this is obviously the IAE. I don't have the CFM version. I think these are excellent, really nice, because it's not just the engines, although the engine sounds are excellent, it's also the other things, the rattles and the squeaks and so on. But yeah, the NEO ones on the Microsoft Flight Simulator, not bad at all. Bad Dog, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. And yes, X-Plane is definitely still going strong for us here. Grosnak says that they've started flying the 320 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Any time I fly it manually, it feels like the autopilot is still on and it refuses to climb like I want. So that is an issue, is a glitch, I'm sure, because I find without the autopilot it doesn't pitch properly. It usually won't pitch enough. There's another glitch which means that if you're on, I think it's below maybe 500 feet, you can't even pitch up anymore, but that's something to do with the mod and so on. But even so, even before any of that, right from the start, the vertical, the pitching up and down has been weak in it, I find, whereas the ToLiss is much more representative. So because you can pitch to 2.5 G in the real aircraft if you put all the way back on the side stick in a abnormal situation. So the one in Microsoft Flight Simulator definitely isn't doing that. Oh, there we go. Apparently there's been a sound improvement with the fly-by-wire mod. So maybe I've already got it. I don't know. I think they're yeah, absolutely fine. Pavel has a question. Why do some airlines have the same call sign and flight number and some do not? Good question. I do not know. That'll be any number of reasons. They mentioned EasyJet. Perhaps EasyJet has different AOCs, so they have EasyJet Swiss, then there's EasyJet UK, and I imagine several others now. So they probably have to use a different call sign for each of those. I know Norwegian does the same. There's North Shuttle, also Red Nose. So that's quite common. So if it's a different base for that airline running under a different AOC, it could use a different call sign. Dougal, enjoy your dinner. Thank you very much for your hard work helping us out today. Definitely. Thank you. A380 Airbus says, why aircraft don't have an AMOLED display? That is a good question. I don't know of any. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there is some fancy pants aircraft out there that does have OLED screens. It came up on one of my previous videos where I talk about the fact that the screens are often dim, so you'd set them to dim before shutting down the aircraft or leaving it to help save the screen life, and instead of turning it actually off. And someone said, don't you get burn-in? But I must admit, on some aircraft I've seen it, but on the screens that they use in these screens I haven't seen it. I don't know whether they get replaced or have technology that stops it. So an OLED screen, I could see the issue being potentially based around the burn-in, but I don't know. It also takes a long time for any technology to get certified and approved. I mean, they were making Airbuses with the CRT style, the old style curved screens, over, through the year 2000 and onwards, obviously. So it could just be a certification issue, and I imagine it's more expensive as well, I guess. It's a good question though, interesting. Hadn't really thought about it. Right. Oh, there we go again. Every time. That's it. There we go, Mach. I think I saw a question earlier today that said, when does it change from Mach to speed? And we can actually do that now. If I press that. No, it won't have it too high. Basically, it will change over automatically based on the climb speed. So if the climb speed was set to 300 knots, well, now the cruise speed is set to 7.8, but it was set to 300 knots, for example. As you're climbing, eventually your Mach number will intercept it. So 300 knots at 5,000 feet will be a very low Mach number, under 0.5 probably. But I don't know, there are ways to calculate it, but it does depend on all sorts of things like temperature, outside temperature, and so on. As you climb, your indicated airspeed, the speed on here, will reduce. So we were at 300 knots in the climb, or whatever we were at. I think it was roughly 300. As you climb, that will gradually reduce and reduce, even though you're still moving through the air. So it will stay at 300 knots until at the point where 300 is the same as Mach decimal, whatever it wants, decimal 77, 76, maybe in the climb. At that point, it will swap over to a Mach number because, as you can see, we can't fly at 300 knots up at this altitude because it's too fast, even though our true airspeed is all the way up at 451. Now, the air is thinner up here, which is why the airplane can only sense 265 knots worth of speed, because it senses the airspeed based on the pressure building up on front of the airplane through the air. And obviously, as you go higher, that pressure is less. But we start to get limited by the Mach number. The Mach number is what stops us being able to fly faster up here. If we go too fast, certain parts of the aircraft will start to develop shock waves, they'll lose airflow, you can get all sorts of problems. So that's why we have a limit there as well. That's probably not a great way of explaining it, but that's roughly why. So yeah, so it will convert when it wants to, when on the conditions of that day, the 300 knots would become whatever Mach number it wants to climb at. Same for the descent. We can see now the descent phase is planning to do a decimal 7.8 descent, so it's going to use Mach decimal 7.8. As we get lower, it will convert to 327. So to maintain Mach decimal 7.8, this airspeed is going to gradually increase, and it will keep increasing all the way up to try and maintain decimal 7.8, because as we get lower, we'll need to go faster to maintain that Mach number. And finally, it will reach 327 knots, and then it will change to the speed. It has to change, because if it doesn't, you'll overspeed. Because you'd have to get decimal 7.8 at 10,000 feet, you'd have to be going way faster than the aircraft will allow, because then you're being limited not by the Mach shock waves, but you're being limited by the pressure on front of the aircraft. It's it's one of those topics. Performance is a big topic that we learn about when you learn to fly aircraft, and it's if you think about the pilots that went supersonic, there's a whole other world of knowledge they have to do that. Yeah, very complex stuff. Yeah, Andy, I do need some blue tack. That is a good idea. I'll definitely try and get some sorted. Pamela from London, England, thanks for joining us. Marina Halley, thanks for coming along. I think I replied to one of your comments earlier today, so thanks for joining us here. Question, what's the screen above the MCDU? It's not here in ToLiss, it is in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's CPDLC. So you can't see it now, but it's a new way to talk to air traffic controllers. What it does is its messages get sent, it all gets sent through the system that's been installed, the CPDLC system, but it gets displayed up here, and you can actually reply. That's why you've got this ATC comms. It's not featured on the ToLiss, but yeah, so messages appear up here, such as climb flight level 350, and then you can press little buttons and respond. So that's what that's used for. It's used for talking to air traffic control. The radio is still the primary use, so that's always there as a backup, and it's how you first check in. But these days, more and more, we actually communicate through the box. The reason is it reduces capacity on the air traffic controllers. It allows them to talk more freely to people checking in, and then send messages out as they need to, as opposed to having to spend the time to tell us, then we have to read it back, and then sometimes you might miss it, things like that. Jodas, I'm afraid I don't know the answer to your question there. Jodas is asking about Microsoft Flight Simulator. Apparently the speed's going to 0. All I can think is if you activate the approach phase and you set manage speeds, that little up arrow I think it is, to push that away and put out the flap, it should reduce the speed to VAP when you have flap full. So I'm afraid I don't know. There are bugs still in it, so it does cause issues. Oh, Swappy S says 11.5 is final for X-Plane. I didn't know that. I did not know that. So there we go. Right, we don't need this chart anymore, or this chart, or this chart, or that one. What we can do is bring up Edinburgh, I suppose. You might have a look at some alternates on the way for weather, especially on a longer flight like this. But we're going to start off. Dimitri, thank you for subscribing. Thanks for joining us. Right, let's go to not that arrival. Now I think I've got the Perth arrival in. Yeah, we're coming in from the north, so that's no good. But my plan, yeah, Perth. I'm going to try and take us round to Tartan and then do a visual in from the south. Or we could maybe do a visual from the north. I'm not sure, depending on the weather. Our never arrivals though, pretty simple, nice and straightforward. Only 2 of them. We'll have the RLS set up for runway 24. There's a backup, ready to go. Finally, let's get proper airport charts. That's the airport and the parking. There we go. Sean, thank you for subscribing. I hope you're enjoying the videos as well. Right. What I'm going to do then, guys, is just take a quick break here, and then I'll be back soon to answer some more questions, and we'll get ourselves set up for our arrival. Arriving in, how long have we got now? 18:38, yeah, about an hour. So, yeah, I'm just going to take a quick break. We'll put some interlude music on, and I will see you very shortly. Let's give ourselves a nice view just for the moment. Hello, hello. We are back. I hope you guys enjoyed the music there. It's let me check. I am back. Yes, I am. Good. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that music. I do quite like it. It's I must get the name. It was it's one of the YouTube free music to use in your content. But there you go. Right, so we are still here in the cruise. Excellent. That's good news. There we go. Somebody is having fun over there. That's typical. You'd see that if a fighter jet was nearby. But there you go. Let's see what questions I could have missed. I'm sure there's plenty. Yeah, sounds like you enjoyed the music, which is good. Mariner Halley's been looking at purchasing X-Plane. Looking forward to the stream. Yeah, it's X-Plane. The one thing I will say, of course, is that this is an add-on aircraft, so this is payware. So you don't get it included with X-Plane. You do get a 737 that can be modded with the Zebo mod, which is free, and that's very popular and very accurate. So there are definitely options in there for you. Yes, Tango Delta. I remember those old streams. We did a lot of our fun charter flights. We went down through the Canaries down to we were in Marrakesh, I think, as well, and so on. Yeah, it was good fun. And we might head back down there. And we did talk at the time that we would revisit them in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I just need that Airbus to be a little bit more reliable so we can go and have some fun, because it'd be interesting to compare the scenery in it. But even so, we've got plenty more of Europe to explore in the ToLiss as well. Right, let's have a look. I do love this time of day with the sun beaming across the FCU up here. It's always very relaxing time to be flying. Right, so let's see. Probably time to bring up some of our charts. So let's do it the proper way. Tab tablets. Right, here and here. There we go. I do like having all these pop-out screens. It is nice and clear for us. So our route currently is going to have us. Let's set that to black and zoom in a bit. We've got Bruce, Finer, Collide, and then it goes up to Perth and round and in. Ah, that's interesting. Because I did basically the sim brief didn't include much information. So from Clyde it goes over to Perth. So let's come in from the south then, because that'll make that's sort of what I wanted to do anyway. What if we try Perth? No, we're not coming from Perth. What am I talking about? Get rid of that. We want to do... Oh, let's do 4. I'm sorry, guys. I do try to avoid streaming me scrolling through SIDS and stars. It seems like these names have changed, so let me... That's my excuse. It's always bad when you hear excuses. Right. Arrival. There's only 2 charts. Must be this one then. Right, let's do input. Yeah, there is. First one. Via Tartan. Is Tartan the holding point these days? This has changed a fair bit since I was last using it. Looks like a straight in line. That seems pretty good. I won't put a via then. And let's, instead of going, we don't go to input, let's go Collide, get rid of that. You'd probably have to, you load it in like this, but then fingers crossed, air traffic would let us skip out some of those points. And in fact, I'm going to hope that they would skip us out. And the magic of us being our own air traffic is we can go in Rev Tartan. There we go. In fact, we're not going to do that. Let's get rid of InRev. Don't want to go to InRev either, do we? So Clyde, Tartan. Excellent. And there we go. These are RNAV arrivals, but they do still use the old school names, which I like. Tartan obviously being a Scottish woven pattern, I suppose. Right, that looks a bit better. Clyde, Tartan, and then in from the south. Fantastic. Then we're going to fly the ILS, but we may convert it to a visual approach. The ILS is pretty standard, 3,000 foot platform, 3 degrees. Inbound course of 241, down we go, all pretty normal. Yeah, 300, so the elevation must be about 300 feet, 100 feet, so that's the minimum. Go around if we need it, straight ahead, 540 feet, overfly, which is that little triangle there, that's what that means, and then pretty much straight ahead. Jefferson right it up here, straight ahead 3,000, then as directed, lovely and easy. And we got missed approach with confade there, same thing, but you have to turn right back to locator. So that's the flight plan, looks reasonable. Radnav, well, we know this will tune later in. Progress page, Echo Golf Papa Hotel, runway 24. Good. Performance page. Let's put in some of the minima. So minima of 300 MDA. Totally normal. I mean, that's just a really standard ILS. I think we have done an RNAV recently. I should really do another one. There we go. 550 IVR required, which is absolutely fine. Let's check the weather then. What have they got? 250 at 10. Lovely. View at 29. We may have to adjust the weather to make it easier for ourselves to see our visual. 10 degrees, fairly chilly, QNH 1011. That's good. It's slightly low, but not too low, so the difference between our flight level and altitude is not too severe. Config full for landing. BS 140. Yeah, 145. That's all fine. Go around altitude if we need it, 3000, so put that in there. Fuel prediction, loads of fuel. We got almost 3 tons extra when we get there. Secondary could be a copy. So we've got 2 options now. If we want to do the visual approach, you do have to check through the other plates. So there are loads. Arrival, let's see. I think there's going to be some guidance for noise abatement. Approaches is with radar, without radar. Noise abatement for continuous descent. They want us to do 160 from 8 to 4 typically, that's getting more and more common these days. It just helps, I suppose, with low noise because you won't put the gear out too early. No, that's not the chart we need. Arrival continue. Visual approach, runway 24. Propeller driven aircraft. That's not us. All visual approaches from the south of the runway 24 with a weight over 5.7 tons. That is us. Are to be made from not less than 7 miles on the extended centre line. Don't descend below 2,000 feet until crossing the Firth Forth coastline northbound. All visual approaches from the north. Well, that's not us today. We're going to come in from the south. So we have to go via 7 miles. So let's put in EGPH24. And we'll put a 7 mile radius. Now, if we scroll through, we can see that there. This feature isn't available, sadly, in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but now I can see that, well, actually, it's not going to be much different to just flying the green line. But if I was to do a visual, I could fly in around this and then turn final, hopefully turning within about 7 miles there. What's worth doing is setting an idea of what I want to be at 7 miles. So if that's my lateral route, what's my vertical route going to be? I can just cheat, go to the ILS page, 7 miles, 6,000 feet. 6 miles is typically 2,000 feet on a 3-degree ILS, so that would be 2,100 feet today. And then 7 miles would be just over 300 above that, so 2,400 feet, I suppose. 7 miles, something like that would be reasonable. So if I aim for 2,400 there, turning final, probably at that point, definitely want to be flap 2. Maybe put the gear down once we roll out onto final. There we go. So that's a bit of a plan for the visual. MSAs vary. Quite high actually, we've got 3,900 to the south, so we're going to need to be visual before going below that if we're going to do a visual approach, obviously. I can put in another ring if I want, even though I've used up one there. If I go across, let's do just fix 2, EGPH, what's that based on? Oh, it's based on the EDN. So let's put in the Echo Delta November. That'll be a 25 mile ring typically. And now I can just get a sense of when I need to get that MSA sorted. Few comments talking about the ATC in Microsoft Flight Simulator not bringing people down early enough. Yes, it is a known issue, and I think someone's commented on it there. Most of the default ATC in flight simulators tends to not be that capable, sadly. I mean, I can sort of see why. It's a very complicated and dynamic thing to have programmed in. So yeah. I can understand why it's difficult, but yeah, I haven't found the Microsoft Flight Simulator 1 to be any better than anything else I've used, sadly. Inspector Gadget says, did the cat watch the FO when you left the cockpit? Pretty much yes, the cat's always going to be sitting there monitoring the the instruments for me, and even when there's those short breaks, absolutely. And they are currently with us now as well, but thankfully being quite quiet today. Ostu Scan says, hello, how's it going? So thanks for joining us, Ostu. Yeah, going well. I hope you're doing well as well. George FS videos says, how did you get into aviation? Basically, no one in my family was in aviation, but I was obsessed with it just from when I was growing up. So I was always sort of thinking about it and trying to get to it. So that is quite common. Most pilots you meet had a real passion for it and really want to go and become pilots right from the start, because they are. It's a long time. It's a lot of expense. There's a lot of risk at the start, certainly when you're trying to become a pilot. So you have to really, really, really want it, and know that you can put up with all that. Especially even when you have the job, it's not for everyone. Shift patterns, long days sometimes, instability. So rosters changing, days off. If you want to try and get a certain day off, it could be that you have to ask for it or sort it out weeks, months in advance. It's not as simple as just asking your boss for a day off, that sort of thing. But of course, we all do it because we love it, and you get to enjoy some lovely evenings like this, flying the flight deck. So yeah, it's typical, and I'm the same. That it was just something I've always wanted to do. IVCHOU says, as an ATCO, if I gave you a descent clearance and level by, how do you put it in the box? Well, in the real aircraft, once you start a descent, I would get an arrow to show me where I'll level off. It's not in ToLiss yet. I hope it will be added. So you can start your descent and judge it. I could also time it, so I would typically just base it on 3 degrees. So if you said I want you to be, I don't know, level at 300 by Ginga, then I would need to lose 5,000 feet. So I'd do 5 times 3, 15 miles. I need to start my ascent at 15 miles from Ginga, and my ground speed is 500 knots. So actually I'd need to do 2,500 feet per minute to make it. So I'd probably start at 20 miles and just do a thrust idle descent, something like that. But you can put it into the box as well. 300. Does it work in the ToLiss? Out constraint. Oh no, I don't need that then. It does. The ToLiss does sometimes get fussy. There we go. 300 is now in there, and the real aircraft will give you a little arrow and show up. It doesn't seem to do a whole lot in the ToLiss, sadly. But yeah, so that's one way. Yeah, this doesn't really do anything. Scott Keeley says the level off arrow is in the 320 NX mod. So there you go. Some things are being added to it, which is great. A340/330, great username. There's no colour add-ons I'm using. This is just sort of default everything, I think. Aside from obviously the aircraft and the plugins I've got listed, this is just how it comes out of the box, really. Liam thinks that the version 1.5 of the ToLiss includes the arrows. Yes, I have heard there was an update, so I need to get that sorted. I must install that, and hopefully that will be easy, because I'm going to have to see if my livery still works and so on. Mariner is saying, how the unstable version of the A321X, how would you update it? Well, I've only been updating using the stable one typically, and I just remove the old folder in the community packages and put in the new one. So I just follow their instructions and just replace it each time. That's what I've been doing so far anyway. But I've been waiting for the stable versions just because the other one updates so often. It's hard to keep track of it, really. Sean says, when how is flight plan filed with ATC? Well, your company will typically do it if you work for an airline. It's rare because you may only have an hour on the ground, less than that, sometimes half an hour to turn around an airplane. So filing flight plans would be something that the company will sort out for you, and they'll keep track of any slots and so on, but that's when it would get done. Scott says, in the event of a go-around, would ATC direct you to a new approach, or is it manual new flight plan? It varies. I have a video about that, radar vectors and what you do after a go-around. They're done in X-Plane, slightly older videos now, but they are out there. And it depends. Could be in some airports a procedure where you fly the procedure to a fix, you enter the hold, and then you start your approach again. It could be radar vectors straight for another approach, all sorts. It will depend on the airport. If they don't have a radar, for example, then it will be procedural. So that would mean air traffic won't give you headings, you have to follow the charts and fly your way around. If they have a radar and they can keep you safe using it, then they might guide you around quicker. Mariner, you're very welcome, thanks for coming along. Oh, the A321X has an installer now, so there you go. It will let you know if there's updates available. Yeah, they've been working hard, haven't they? A340 330, yes. The ToLiss, I really like the way it feels. I think it feels very close, and its performance is very good as well compared to the real aircraft, in my opinion. No, I don't fly P3D. I only fly X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator now. Thanks for the subscription. And I'm going to struggle to try and pronounce the name, so I do apologise. But Aptem, but that may be completely wrong. But thank you for subscribing. I hope you enjoy the video. Oh yeah, Turtle Kayak seems to think there's a fancy installer now, so yeah, wow, that's amazing. So we're starting to arrive near our coast, which is a nice feeling. Got some options now, EGPO starting to appear. We can in the Avi tablet, of course. Is it route? No. Apps, here we go. We can start to get an idea of where the terrain is around us when it loads. There we go. You can see I haven't used it in a while. Or maybe it's downloading it, I'm not sure. My internet's being probably completely strained by streaming. So we're starting to come in from the coast now. We're going to route into we're going to go obviously past Glasgow over to Edinburgh. Lovely. Edinburgh, I think, is the hometown of one of our long-time viewers, Matteo, or one of his hometowns. Good question from Eve Chu, says, if ATC clear you to a direct route, can you go back to the previous points if asked by ATC? Only one. So if I was going to go direct, I can scroll back one route waypoint. Otherwise, if they say, for example, now direct to Bruce, and then they say go back to Ginga, then that would be okay in the real aircraft, because I could go direct and then scroll back one. Doesn't work in the ToLiss, sadly, but in the real aircraft, yes. If it's more than one waypoint that's been removed because you've done direct, then I'd have to retype it in and work out where you want to go from there. It's very rare though. Air traffic are good. Once they give you a direct, they don't tend to change it back again. That's very rare. Sometimes they give you a direct to a waypoint you don't have, and you have to ask them for further routing or work it out. Sometimes they do that because they have a lot of aircraft. They can't be expected to memorize everyone's flight plan, so they generally do a very good job of remembering where you're going. Or I don't know if they remember or how they know, but they do tend to know what you want. Right, let's also set up medium auto brake, because I don't want to be pushing it. In Edinburgh, we've got a runway of 2,500 meters. It's a long runway, but with that inset threshold, and I want to come off at Bravo probably. So if we go low, we'll just have to roll all the way to the end. Oh yeah, sun's getting low now. If it's dark, it might be a bit difficult to do a visual approach like this, so we may just stick to the ILS. Oh, that's interesting. So Mariner's had issues selecting departures and arrivals in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I've had people commenting that, and I don't really understand why, but it turns out there's a bug with the known version, so there you go. Seems to be if you've modded your sim for the frame rates, it can cause trouble there. That's why I've generally left my sim alone. The Microsoft Flight Sim I'm using, I'm not changing much. I'm just using the NEO mod because I know I can uninstall it very easily because it's just all changing so fast. That sunset is starting to look really nice. More aerobatics going on over there. Not sure what that is. Let's scoot over without setting toga. There's a good question. Is X-Plane 11 still worthy the investment if you've got FS 2020 already? For me, yes, because I fly the Airbus so much, and ToLiss is a really good simulation. It is expensive. You've got to pay for X-Plane plus the aircraft. So if you've already bought Flight Simulator and you're enjoying the scenery and the light aircraft, then it just depends what you want to do. If you want the detailed Airbus, then there's P3D, there's X-Plane, there's other versions for now. Having said that, Flight Simulator will improve, and it's improving quite rapidly with that mod, so it's anyone's guess really. It's up to you what you think is best. But for me, streaming, I have to stream in X-Plane because it's just that bit more. I just know what it's going to do more. This is a long old stream, guys. We're passing 2 hours now. We're still well up in the cruise, so that's thank you for sticking with it, everyone. Normally we're yeah, we're a little more speedy. There we go. We finally reached a waypoint. Look at that actual turn. Yeah, I agree, Dougal. I do think it looks nice. It's when I used FSX for years and years and years. I've said this before, so my regular viewers will be bored of hearing this. But when I came to X-Plane and first tried it out, I couldn't believe the improvement in graphics over what I was used to in FSX. What I really like about X-Plane is some of the physics-related parts to it. So the way you get wingtip vortices, not just drawn on where they think they should be, but actually where the flaps are, and it seems to be based more on the pressure and so on. I don't know if it is, but it looks like it is anyway. You can sometimes get the vapor cloud above the wing, which is a great effect as well. So yeah, I do like X-Plane a lot. Yeah, it does feel a little bit like magic as well, Pamela. CX Hunter 144 says that this is a really nice chat group, by the way. Nice to see internet people with manners. Yeah, it's been a fantastic community right from the start, and there's loads of guys here, or guys and gals I should always say, of course, who have been here just being supportive and helpful to others in the community and enjoying the fun of flying around in the Airbus. So I absolutely agree. It's a great community we've got here. So thank you all for your support and for joining in, really, and being a part of the channel and the experience. Because it's the motivation behind why I've kept doing this, so many videos. I say so many. I'm not, I know people have done a lot more, but without the community behind it, it wouldn't be much fun to just be doing it on your own. Interesting question. Do the slides remain armed on the ground? The 321 depends on which one it is, but this 321 there's no slides on the overwing, so they will all be disarmed, because if we jump outside, you can see that the doors all actually are separate, so there's nothing on the overwing. IVCHOU says if you request 390 and ATC asks you if you can maintain a climb rate of 1500 or above due to opposite traffic, do you know from experience if you're going to make it, or if the computer helps? So, great question. It would depend. You can have a go at entering it into the computer, because you would know that 1500 feet per minute. So let's say the request was maintain 1000 feet per minute or more. So to climb up to 390, so it's going to take 4 minutes, and then you could work out your distance it's going to take you and so on, and then you could see if your arrow is there. But no one will really do that. I could tell you now we're not going to maintain 1500 feet per minute to get up to 390, and I wouldn't want to risk it because it would just be too difficult. What you don't want is to get low on speed up at 390. It would take forever to accelerate. So you tend to be more conservative. If you're confident you can make it from experience, then you might do it. Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, so the only other way to tell would be if they said, can you make it by a certain waypoint, or can you make it by Bruce, and then we could type it in and see. That one is a bit easier. Andy's off to have dinner, socially distanced hotel dinner. I hope you enjoy it. It must be nice to have a sort of restaurant style meal, but yeah, we'll see you later in Discord. Thanks for coming along, Andy. Thanks for your support. Mr. Espresso, yeah, an interesting question I've had a few times. Do you experience technical failures in real flying? How common is it? It's not very common. Yes, they do happen. Typically they are small, very small, and they're just something you get on with and just sort out. You'll have a procedure and a way to do it. If you've seen my managing failure videos, I talk a bit about it there. But the managing failure videos I have, one of them deals with a very small technical thing, and then I've got the complex failure, which deals with one of the largest technical things. So the small ones, yes, but even those are very rare. And like I say, there's so many backups and so on. It's rarely of any interest to major interest. You just get it sorted and carry on to, well, do whatever you think is safest. But it's very rare to see an aircraft divert or so on. It does happen if it needs to, but rare, very rare. There you go. Sasan says flying at 390 above 340 couldn't do more than 900 feet per minute. The ToLiss is good. It has more accurate high altitude characteristics than it used to. It used to really struggle to climb above, I think it was flight level 340, but they fixed that now, which is great. Lawrence Draper says, is it easier to tail strike the 321 over the 320? Yes, it has a different pitch limit. 321 we have to stop pitching up at 7.5 degrees. 320 it's 10 degrees. So you have a lower pitch limit because of that extra long fuselage at the back. Down here. Some of the newer aircraft have systems to stop that. So they say things like pitch if you get close, or if it feels you're pulling the side stick too much. And some of them have a buffer where they'll stop you actually striking out on takeoff. But yeah, there it is. So it is definitely, I'm not going to say easier because it doesn't happen very often, touch wood, you'd hope not ever really, but it's more of a consideration. You just have to be careful with the pitch. A pitch of 7.5 degrees is rare unless there's other circumstances, like it's very heavy and you've got a tailwind and the runway's high altitude, something like that. On a normal landing, 7.5 is, you don't normally reach, you reach about 5 typically. It does depend though. Yeah, Turtle Kayak, yeah, I agree. Those trails are someone using the autopilot from Microsoft Flight Simulator. Oh, it's gone now, but yeah, they have been wobbling all over the place over here. I don't know if that's that MD-80 that left before us. Darian Nahro says, what would happen if you get a TCAS below 1500? Rare. I mean, I think the cutoff is somewhere around 1,000 feet. But yeah, depends on the airline. Well, actually, it depends on the aircraft. In the Airbus, TCAS is reliable. You need to follow it. But it will probably lead to a go-around of some variety. If it needs you to climb, you might have to do a go-around just to get the climb performance because you need to raise the gear to follow the TCAS. But that's only talking about final approach. Ivy Chu, I'm not sure how they like it described. There's if you're climbing and there's a crossing traffic, would you prefer to level off and when clear, continue climb, or be vectored for a few minutes to get a continuous climb? Good question. I have never had that offered. I don't know what air traffic normally do. To be honest, doing extra track miles is, I would say extra track miles is probably not what you want to do, because that will burn more fuel, whereas a level off, although you're not at your cruise altitude, so it's not quite as efficient, probably burns less fuel than having to be vectored further around. I really don't know though. That's a question I haven't really thought about. You never really get the option. Air traffic's typically too busy and they just tell you what to do. I suppose, you know, you get level offs quite often, but if you get a big heading change, that is never, no one ever likes that, because that, you know, it takes fuel and energy just to turn the aeroplane, let alone the extra miles to do it. So probably level off, but that's not got much evidence behind it. Dougal says, does the real-world Airbus have a tail strike alarm in the flight deck? If you mean, can you tell if you've tail striked? No, it doesn't. It doesn't bother. It has no warning for it. There's no sensor for it. Some aircraft do, but the Airbus does not. Yeah, interesting really, isn't it? But it does have the arrows and so on, so you should know. It can also tell, so it would probably send some messages to the engineers to say what pitch, if you had a high pitch event on landing. Probably something like that. Yeah, Gianni, I think I'd agree. I think levelling off would probably be more efficient. You can't dump fuel in the short-haul aircraft. Toga simulations, I'm not on that sim today. Yeah, we can't dump fuel. It's a feature of heavy aircraft because they typically will have long-haul aircraft, sorry, that will have the issue. So the valve is usually here, something like that, but we don't have that requirement. The difference between our maximum landing weight and our maximum takeoff weight, I suppose, just isn't really enough to make it a requirement. Quite often you'll take off below your maximum landing weight anyway, and even if you don't, it won't take long to burn it off, whereas a long-haul aircraft could be significantly above. That's my understanding. So yeah, we don't have that function. This flight deck's starting to look really nice now as the evening sets in. Lovely. So the strobe lights go on when you are entering the runway. They're very bright. You don't want them on whilst you're taxiing around, because they will be very strong for other people and ground crew. So yeah, strobe lights on as you enter the runway, ready to go. They're just used in flight. If you set it to auto, they'll be on in flight anyway, but they'll turn off on the grounds. But we turn them on before we enter the runway, because you want to be as visible as possible once you're on the runway. Ron the Lego 2 says, hi from New Jersey. I hope you're doing well over in New Jersey. It's great to hear people coming from all over the world. I'm glad you've enjoyed the videos. I hope, and it's always nice to hear when they've been useful. David DG27, yes, night landing. One of our first, I think, on stream. Yeah, I could have predicted that if I'd put more thought into it, but there we go. So we probably won't do a visual. I do like the nighttime graphics in X-Plane though. So Sam says, did the same apply to runway turn-off lights? No, runway turn-off you can use for taxiing around. They're not much brighter. Some aircrafts, the taxi light is fitted to the very bottom of the nose wheel. So as you turn the nose wheel, the taxi light moves and turns. So as you turn left, you'll see the light go left and you can see where you're going. It doesn't do that on the Airbus. It always points forward. So the turn-off lights are useful because then you have a light out here and you can see where you're going. There we go. Look at that. I love the nighttime graphics in X-Plane. Really remote part of Scotland. I think we're at Scotland now. Yeah. If you're very welcome. DG27, yeah, turn them off in cloud to stop strobe. Yes. It's to be honest, you don't really do it. You don't need to do it. It's not a requirement. If it's really strong, then yes, you'll turn them off in cloud. What people don't realise is if you're doing a night auto land, so you've got fog and low visibility, you may well turn off the landing lights, especially if you're doing an auto land. but maybe even if you're doing a visual landing, because you won't be able to see the runway lights if out the window you've got the landing lights shining back at you in the fog. So sometimes you'll turn them off for the landing. Yeah, just one of those things. It's just it might help. So A380 Airbus 123, the strobe lights, you leave it auto on the ground, and that way if you forget to turn them on, they'll come on when you get airborne, but as you line up you turn them on. So that's what we do with them. So auto all the time, on when you're on the runway and when you're in flight. Liam Adamson, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed the hobby during the lockdown. Yes, and making these videos has become my hobby during the lockdown as well, so thank you guys for joining me with that. Right, here we go then. I've missed the top of descent in almost every stream I've ever done. I'm sure today will be no exception. Right, let's start down. Nice quiet airspace coming in from here, so as we are our own ATC, let's do managed descent. Deads. Down we go. Out blue, so we're checking we've got an armed flight level 100, and it has armed correctly. And these are the bits that are so good in the ToLiss that I hope we get seen added into Microsoft. These FMAs are so important because really that tells us what the airplane's doing. Thrust idle. Hamler says everyone here very techie, amazed by anyone who flies. It's as I said earlier, it's one of those things that you just have to have a lot of passion for, because you're going to keep having to learn it, and there are loads of people, you're absolutely right, who are really into it, which is great to see, and the enthusiasm we've had on the Discord and the YouTube amazes me, because people ask us great questions and really want to learn how to do it properly in their free time, which I think is fantastic. So it's always great to see the enthusiasm. Miko, no, I haven't tried the Thrustmaster sightstick, I'm afraid. Hello from Finland. I hope you're doing well over there. It must be a dark evening there. I don't know how cold it is. Is it snowing in Finland yet? Hello from San Diego, video man Chris. I hope San Diego's doing alright, and hopefully that's definitely warmer than Finland. Glad you've been enjoying the videos and the streams. Thanks for coming along. Brian Wong says, is the DME compass working in X-Plane? Yeah, the nav aids do work. Let's tune up. I mean, the Airbus automatically tunes, so we don't tend to do much. But let's tune up. Well, as you specified, DME. Are there any VORs left in Edinburgh? Must be. Oh, there's the EDN NDB. Let's see if we can tune that. Thank you for the subscription. Thank you to Lonnie Harrison. Thanks for joining us. But yeah, basically these do work. The DME and the needles, which is a really nice feature. 341. Let's see if we can get it to work. Having said that, it probably won't work for me now. There we go. 341 on the NDB. I've got it set to VOR, so I set it to ADF. And then it should, as we get closer, NDBs aren't very good. They're not that reliable, so they don't work too bit closer. We'll see if that one comes to life. I'll be interested. They're from Tasmania. Excellent. People from all over. Toga simulations, no problem. People can ask away. Like I say, sorry if I don't manage to answer all the questions. I do try, but obviously I'm trying to look over at the other screen and match it up, so I do miss things. "70 Fahrenheit," says Video Man Chris in San Diego. Lovely. Must be nice. And Darian, hello from Iraq. So we've got people from everywhere. Fantastic. Good question. Does the autopilot use the air brakes spoilers to slow the plane down during the descent? No, absolutely not. It will never do that. It might tell you. It might say more drag. It will flash up on the PFD if it thinks you're going to be too high. So it will tell you to use them, but it won't ever use them on its own. No. I don't think there's any scenario where it does actually, except on landing when you arm it. Rohan says, any tips for planning your descent if you know it's broken in Flight Simulator 20? Yes, if you know how far you've got to the airport. So, well, firstly, how high are you? If you're at 30,000 feet, for example, in the cruise, times that by 3, so 90, 30 times 3, 90. That's 90 miles. So that's a 3-degree descent would be 90 miles. Then add a bit extra, 10 miles to slow down, so 100 miles. If you've got a tailwind, like we've got a 50 knot tailwind today, I would add a bit more, maybe another 10 or 20 miles. So from 30,000 feet, maybe 100 miles in still air or a headwind, maybe a bit more with a tailwind. So from 35,000 feet, obviously, that's going to be 105 plus a bit. So that's a rough start. To fly 3 degrees, you need to do your ground speed. You can either do times 5 or divided by 2 plus a 0 is what I tend to do. So ground speed is 470. Let's round that up. That's 500. So if I divide that by 2, it's 2.5 or 250 or whatever you want it to be. So 250, so 2,500 feet per minute. Really simple. It's simple, basic. I don't say basic maths like you should know it. What I mean is that's just these simple tools we use, because you don't want to spend all your time working out the really specific details. So 3 times table is what we use most of all as pilots. You don't use much other maths. Adding, subtracting, and 3 times tables is the most common. So that's just to give you a rough idea. So if you keep working on that, 3 degrees, do I have enough room for 3 degrees? I can look in here for the distance. I've got 87 miles. I'm at 21,000 feet. So that's 21. Well, let's times it by 3. So that'd be 63 miles required. Plus 10, 73. And I've got 86. So I've got lots of room. I have got a strong tailwind though, so I need to have that extra, which is probably why this is about on profile. Genuine MP5, if you have more drag written, would you use speed brakes or flaps? You use the speed brake. You would only use the flaps as you get closer. If you're really heavy in a 321, as you get lower, or if air traffic asks you to slow down, you might be better off getting the speed back enough to be able to use the speed brakes. So you'd need to use flap 1. That's not a very good way of explaining it. Basically, when I use the speed brake, the BLS will increase. The ToLiss doesn't simulate this though. If that increases, you can't use any more speed brake. So one way around that is to slow down, put out some flaps, then you get the drag from the flaps, and then you can use the speed brakes. But when you're up here at 20,000 feet, you would, firstly, you can't use the flaps until you're below 20,000 feet, and even then, you'd never use them this high. That's sort of a closer in sort of thing that we're going to use the flaps to slow down. But we do use them eventually, of course, and we'll use them for drag if we need to. But that's sort of more of a, when you're on base leg, so maybe 15 to 20 miles from the airport. From this far out, you'll just speed up and use the speed brakes. Rusty Dog, hello. Jonathan Blood says, is there any warning mechanism when the autopilot's reaching limits? No. You have to know the limits for the landing or auto-landing autopilot. And it's very good at the Airbus. It can handle a lot of turbulence, but if it doesn't, it will just drop out. Very rare. I've only seen it once. So typically it can handle in flight or the autopilot or the turbulence and so on. Gianni, so the rule of thumb for the vertical speed for a 3-degree glide slope is the same. Look at your ground speed, and we'll see it later on, and then divide it by 2 and add a 0. So now we're basically at 400 knots ground speed. That's divided by 2 would be 200, so 2,000 feet per minute is what we require to maintain 3 degrees. It works on final approach as well, and you get these little tables. Ground speed 120 divided by 2 would be 60, so 600 feet per minute, and you can see 637, so close enough. No one can fly to 37 feet a minute. Well, they can, but I don't know any. How early would the ILS kick in? Yeah, interesting question really. We can't normally use it until we're within 30 miles. So, starting to get a view out the window now. As you can see, we can just see the towns. It won't really be sensible to do a visual at night like this. You can do visuals at night in some places, but it's not going to work today. Also changed my monitor, so I've got slightly higher contrast than I'm used to. So I can actually just see pitch black. And this, of course, is Orbex. So having said that we'd have lovely Orbex scenery, I've now brought you to a nighttime view out the window of nothing. But there you go. It still should be quite interesting. As you get lower down, we'll make sure that we've got the dome light off. You'd probably fly along like that in the cruise. Keep yourself lit up. Keep yourself engaged. Maybe dim. People like that one. And then as you get lower down, that can go off. You want to get the best view outside that you can get. Let your eyes adjust to it. BAF McNabb, thanks for joining us. Jonathan Blood, yeah. So Jonathan's flew into red patches in the radar and the autopilot disconnected. Obviously we avoid red in the aircraft because we just don't want to get stuck with the turbulence in there. It's just not safe. Could have hail and things like that. So I don't know what you'd see there. But in terms of the turbulence we typically encounter, the Airbus autopilots pretty much always manage to look after itself with me. The time it might drop off is if you're slow. If you hit VLS and below, it can start to get a little bit more upset. Right, here we go then, coming through 10,000 feet almost. Let's get the seatbelt signs on. Bring up the ILS, ready to go. India Victor Golf. There it is. So, question there from, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten your name. BAF McNabb. Interested to see me fly DME Arc. It's actually not what this has bothered to code in. You'd nearly always get radar vectors into Edinburgh, but this is actually just drawn a straight line. It can fly DME Arcs. So I'm a little curious why it hasn't bothered. Maybe if I'd done the transition via Tala. I won't fiddle with it now though, because you typically get radar vectors anyway. Let's get those landing lights on now as we're slowing down. Oh, hard to see there. I don't know if you guys can see that a bit better than my screen is showing me. Two Point says, in approach landing, are you mostly focused on your PFD or the visuals? Depends. If you can see out, then you can start to use both. You'd still have to use this down the approach just to make sure you are following it, but the visuals are very useful. They make life much easier. If you've got a nice clear view outside, if it's in IMC, i.e. instrument conditions, then your PFD is all you get, so you'd have to focus in on that. Right, we are inside our ring. We know 4,000 feet is safe here. Let's go down to 4. Time to set QNH, which was 1011. 1011. Also, time to, it will activate itself, but it won't do it until there. So let's activate the approach phase now. It's got a constraint because it wants to be 7,000 feet at Tartan. So I'll let it do it actually. It's unusual, but I'll let it do that. That's what it's planned its descent on. A340 330 has a good question, especially relevant to their name. Are you looking forward to fly the ToLiss 340? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. My goodness, I am really looking forward to that. I know it's not coming out until 2021, but I definitely want to fly the 340. Definitely. Especially if it's this quality, because it will give us a chance to just see what the differences are, really. I've never flown one, and they're getting rarer and rarer in real life, but it's a lovely looking aeroplane, and it's nice and quiet if you've been a passenger on one. So yeah, absolutely looking forward to that. There we go, there's Edinburgh. Now, yes, you can set it to night mode. Dimming these screens is a common issue for flight crew, so they have to be able to be dimmed really, really well. This one only has night mode effectively, but on the real ones you can dim them very well. There we go, last 1,000 feet. Once we're behind that, we're going to carry on our descent. Couple of questions about crosswind component. It depends on the aircraft and the engines and whether you're doing an autoland. Typically 38 knots, but of course if you're on a slippery runway that will be lower. But yeah, 38 knots crosswind is a common limit on the Airbus short haul family anyway, which is a lot. That's more than enough. Airbus does say that that's not an actual limitation, it's just the maximum they've demonstrated, but you can bet airlines will stick to that. They won't want you trying to demonstrate more than their test pilots have. Speed out constraint, which is what that means. Out constraint, because it's leveling at 7, and then it should carry on down. Des mode is armed. You don't normally do this. I've said before, people ask, I would actually, if I wanted to level off here, or air traffic was telling me to, or we were flying procedurally, I'd actually set that to 7, making sure the airplane definitely will not descend below it until I'm happy it can. So we've got the little blue arrow, so it should start down shortly. There's our ADF needle, so it is working, pointing at the EDN. Pretty much the only nav aid we have here, aside from the ILS. Let's jump into a nice, without going to toga, passenger view. You can see those landing lights lighting up the engine. They are noticeable, definitely. Keith says, with a constraint, how do you know if you must be above or below? So this tells me, for example, 3,000 minus. So that's saying below 3,000 feet. Now, I don't think that's right, actually. I'm not sure why it says that, but yeah, so minus or plus, typically. Right, what have we got out there? Oh, I'm not sure. Is that oh, we got some water effects. What's on the island? Oh, excuse me, everyone. I'm really sorry. Oh, my goodness. It's an aircraft carrier. No way. And out our left, we're going to have Edinburgh Castle. Somewhere. I think it would be somewhere here. Yeah, it's a real shame. I should have thought about this and set it up. There's Edinburgh Airport. We can see that now. I think the castle's here. I think that's what that's supposed to be. Up on the hill. And then you've got Arthur's Seat out here. That's the station, I think. How embarrassing. Yeah. I love these X-Plane graphics though at night. I think that looks fantastic. Right, let's focus up then. Speed is looking good. We'll be 4,000 feet as we come over the coast roughly. It's absolutely fine. I'm reducing below 220 knots, no problems there. Water effects starting to kick in. I do have the water lure script, I believe, installed, which might make that look slightly different to yours. If you lose backlights on your instruments, what protocol would you follow? Well, these screens obviously are lit themselves, so it's slightly different to the old days when you had dials and you had to check the lighting for the dials, and maybe you could use a torch or something. If you lose the screen, you lose the instruments, but you'd have a backup on the other screens. So if you lost all the screens, even in emergency electrical config, which would be the only time you'd get that, so a serious electrical failure in a speed out style, this one would still work anyway. So you'd always have one screen that's lit and usable. Right, let's go flaps to 1. There they are. That light up there is on, not typically on. That's this one, so let's turn that down. There we go. Right, 3,000 feet, safe here. Down we go. Thrust idle open descent. And let's put out flap 2. Flaps to 2. 4,000 feet up. Yeah, so we're probably even a little bit fast and high now, which is no surprise to most of you, I'm sure. Track miles left to run, it reckons about 12. So 4,000 feet, 12 miles is absolutely fine. With flap 2, we now get some drag. So if I now pull a vertical speed, let's go for 1,000 feet per minute. Speed, vertical speed. The plane will continue to slow down because it's targeting that F speed. The fantastic glow of the city. Should have the bridges as we turn around as well. And it should bring us up nicely looking at the runway. Yeah, we've cut out that arc completely. Well, we're visual, we're over the water. 9 miles is 3,000 feet, but we're going to need to be ready to descend slightly lower than that. So let's go down to 2,500 feet. Because we're going to turn in... Oh, not like that. Oh, what's it doing? There we go. 2,500. Round the corner we go. Once we're pointing in towards the airport, we can start on the approach. So there you go. 8 miles, 3,000 feet, slightly high. Let's drop that to 2,000. 180 knots at 8 miles is absolutely fine energy-wise. Pointing towards the airport, arm approach. Second autopilot. Glide slope and localizer are armed. Autopilot 1 and 2 have engaged. Glide slope is now engaged. Localizer engaged, so that's good. And now we'll carry on down the approach. It did say 160 to 4 really, didn't it? So let's do that. Typical these days, as I said. There's the bridges, and there we are looking down at the runway in front of us. Lovely. Bridges over here in the dark. Radio altimeter is alive. You'd expect it exactly at 2,500 feet because we're over water, over sea level, so it should match up. We'll do 160 to 4, so at 4.5 miles I'm going to configure and slow down. We haven't got much speed to lose. Our approach speed is about 145. Now we're on the glide slope, we can put that go around altitude in, so let's set that to 3,000. Ready for a missed approach if we need it. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic graphics. Right, where is it? Yeah, I mean that's obviously the church. There's the castle, there it is, we found it. I did show you some of Edinburgh. Let's not forget everything else. Oh yeah, cabin thing them, make sure they're ready. Good. Just before we manage the speed, I will make sure approach phase is activated, because if you've forgotten, it can be very embarrassing. 4.5, let's manage the speed. Let's put the gear down. As the gear's travelling, let's go flaps to 3. Speed is still below that, so flaps to full. Get the last of the lights on. So there we go. Do I have a landing checklist to use? We do. Cabin is secured, all the thrust is in speed mode, which is correct. Going altitude is 3,000 feet, and the ECAM memo is almost landing the blue. There it is. So you can see, even by doing it at 4.5, as long as you've got the speed under control, it's fine. If you were in a lighter aircraft, like a light 319, and it was turbulent, and you had to come back to an approach speed of maybe 125, then that could be more difficult to achieve. Especially in a 319, they don't slow down as well. Right. 1,000. We are stabilised at 1,000 feet. We're going to carry on then. Good. Medium water brake is in. Excellent. Just didn't those screens ever so slightly. You'll also see lots of pilots start fiddling with their chair at this point, trying to make sure they get it sorted. Thank you for the subscription, Marcus. I hope you're enjoying the video. Right, let's see if I can remember the buttons to turn everything off. So we're going to go... Right, let's get this set up right. Right, autopilot off. Triple click, as we talked about earlier. We all enjoy the triple click. Bring up the PFT. Not really having to do anything. You may hear my joystick creaking. There it is. Now I do find it gets extra sensitive, the X-plane glide slope at this point, so yeah, try not to overreact to it. You see that red arrow saying 10, even a limit 7.5. The tail strike would probably happen around 10 degrees, that's why that's there. A little bit high on the pappies. Oh, look at that, light starting to light up.
50, 40, 30, 20, retard.
Idle thrust levers, hold it there, hold it there, hold it there, hold it there. There's touchdown. Spoilers! Let's get those reversers out. Why can't I do it? I've forgotten the key for the reversers now. Come on. What was it? F1, there we go. Reverse green and decel. Medium water brake taking all the strain there. We only had reverse idle. Good. And there we go. We've decelerated. Now we're down at taxi speed of 10 knots. We can go to forward idle. F2. There we go. For goodness sake, I should have got that right. I do apologise. Well, let's get ourselves over to the left. Yeah, I liked the way the landing lights lit up the ground as we got lower. Fantastic. Nice, lovely, calm wind conditions and evening here in Edinburgh tonight. And I've got to say, as we go into winter, in summer you do a lot of daylight flying, but I do really like some of these night flights as you cruise around. Let's take our exit here, which we briefed earlier. 14 knots, a bit fast. There's something definitely about it that makes it really spectacular. You get slightly smoother air at night as well, so that can be good fun. Right, let's clear the runway and we'll talk about some of those lights. I am planning to do a video, so taxiways is one video, lights is another video. I get a lot of questions about the lights and when we use them. It's all clear around. Let's go park up on our stand of our cruising. Here we go, alpha, left or right. One of the few scenarios where the taxiway is before the sign, but there it is. Okay, so we're off the runway. We don't want to blind everyone, so we can turn off the landing lights and you can see we can still see just fine. Let's do the strobes as well. Let's disarm the ground spoilers. Oh, come on. There you go. Flaps can go to 0. So how was that? 320 viewers apparently, so that's great. Thank you all for coming along. I hope you enjoyed the stream. We're going to do a replay as always, so we will get to see that from a couple of other views, although a little hard to see at night. Double red arrow during the flare is the tail strike warning, so it's just saying a maximum pitch limit. Pamela's in the London basement, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us today. Right, where should we park? I do enjoy having total choice. Let's go in via Echo and then park maybe on stand 6 if that's available. Let's get the APU up and running. And so if I turn off the taxi light, there you go, it's pretty dim in front, and there's those turn off lights, so they point out the side primarily. So yeah, you want that and that on. The takeoff light is even brighter. Boom, yeah, but we don't intend to use that for landing. Thank you for the subscription. Thanks for joining us. To Offman. Alpha Stars flying from Gibraltar. So I hope you enjoy that. Always a bit of fun, Gibraltar. APU's coming online. We're going to turn right here. Like I say, we'll park up and then we'll run our little replay. Thank you all for joining us on this flight. I hope you've enjoyed it. So we're going to go right here into Echo 1. Get the speed around 10 knots for this. Park just to the left of the fuel truck. Looks like they're ready for us already. That clunk helps me know that the APU is available. You can hear the generator coming. Oh, what just happened there? No! That was our stand. Oh dear. Right, next one it is then. That's 6 gone. They were obviously waiting for a MD-80 from America to magic itself over. Well, we'll park next to them. Here we go, stand 7. So now just looking out. Oh, turn off the lights. Don't want to blind the ground crew. Turn ourselves onto 7. See all our passengers waiting for the next flight. Ground vehicles whizzing around. Right, let's see if we can get ourselves a stop line. There it is. Excellent. I like the shiny fuselage. That's quite well modelled. Yeah, we don't have any guidance sadly, so we can't. Oh no, that's no good. We've got to get tail in the line. Come on, forwards. Does happen sometimes when you're parking the real aircrafts, and you have to be very careful not to spool up the engines too much. With all the ground crew around. There we go. Okay, so parking brake is set. The APU is available. Let's shut down those engines. Brakes are very hot. I don't think they'd reach 520 on that sort of a landing in reality, but there we go. They can both go off. And I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on our flight to Edinburgh. I hope you enjoyed it, our first night flight. So a bit of fun there in our party plane, as it was described when it was first released, our pink livery. David, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. Dougal as well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Alpha Star, thank you all very much for coming along. Lots of new faces here today. I'm sorry if I haven't got round to answering your questions. Thank you to all of those who very generously have helped support the stream with donations. Oh no, there's a fuel truck that's gone through us, but it's greatly appreciated. And like I said, more videos to come in the future. We will be working on some more Microsoft Flight Simulator videos. Certainly a Microsoft Flight Simulator stream is becoming more likely. Maybe we'll do it in a GA plane at some point as well for a bit of fun. But all these things to come. Right, let's go and have a look at the replay. It is absolutely required, of course. So if I just whiz us back, there we go. So this was us gliding in, nice and quiet, because you have very low thrust. The magic of 160 to 4 is, as you can see here, thrust is right back, almost at idle, and then we'll just lower the gear, which creates a bit more noise, but that just happens a bit later. What we'll do is we'll just C1 from the threshold, external runway, and this is a feature I really, really, really would like to see in. Sorry, excuse me, just while I work this out. In Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's the replay function is really good. Right, let's see if we can get it. Should be shift 3. There we go. And what I usually do is just go further into the runway, because you have to land past the threshold, which is why you got those red lights there, not usable. Just get ourselves to the side. Now, I don't know what's going to be visible now, guys, so I do apologize. Yeah, no reverse thrust, MH. It's a good point. That could have certainly not helped. It does definitely provide some gentle reverse, even when you're using idle, definitely. Alpha Star, yes. Yeah, the ultra brake will work regardless of the reverses. So here we go. I love the lighting up of the grounds. Into the flare. There's our touchdown. Fantastic. Look at that. Great fun. And there's our rollout. See it wobbling around, keeping on the center line. Okay, let's set it up for the landing then. So we'll go to our standard view. I think that's still on the approach. Not sure why the cabin lights are on. I would hope they'd be a bit dimmer by then. We'll have the view of Edinburgh out the sides. God, look at that. That was a long old stream. Yeah, that was quite a nice final visual angle. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is say thank you very much for joining us. Again, thank you to all of you for subscribing and joining in, and the very generous donations today. It's hugely appreciated, and hopefully see you again in another video soon as we start looking at new things in Flight Simulator and X-Plane and other tutorials and little bits and bobs, as well as more streams to come in the future. So thank you very much, guys. Anyone who's on the Discord as well, I'll speak to you soon on there, no doubt. And all of you have a great evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.